Registration Service, Assistant Registrar of Companies.
Good morning. My name is Safari Mulai from Kenya Revenue Authority, Customs and Border Control. I'm here to engage with you. Thank you.
Thank you. Morning. I'm James Okal from the Kenya Revenue Authority, DTD. I'm working under the Office of Digital Economy Tax Office. Thank you.
Good morning, all. My name is Lenny Nganga. I'm wearing two hats today. I represent Stars and Media Limited, and also I'm the council member for legislation for the Association of Practitioners in Advertising.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Kanyi Ohawa, and I represent Wabuni Sacco.
Good morning, all. My name is Roy Gitahi. I had DTD, so Art at Work is AAW, just in case. We're using those names. Very good, and happy to be here. Asante sana.
Good morning. Wanja Wangondu is my name, from the Tax Service Authority, Shiva.
Very good morning. My name is Martha Ngoko from Marketing Office, Tax Education. Karibuni sana.
And now that we know each other in the room, however, I'm finding us a little bit stiff. So would you allow me to ask us to loosen up just a bit? So I just want us to do one very quick exercise. And because I know you've eaten, I know that you have the energy to be able to do it. I know whenever you hear you're coming to see Zakayo, there is the expectation maybe you shall not be living here the way you came. But maybe if you remember the story of Zacchaeus, it was that after he got the conviction, he said he shall pay everyone 4 times over what he had taken, correct? So today you may receive a refund 4 times over what you brought to us, yeah? So I can guarantee you, whenever you visit Zakayo, things could always work out in your favor. Now, I believe that most of us, because I'm seeing a lot of Gen Xers and millennials, we remember those small things we were taught in Sunday school, yeah? And there was a very popular song, I will make you. I will. Few. You know, I used to sing if you want to grow, but. So, but as you notice, there's a lot of F's and a lot of M's, yeah? So wherever you hear an F, I expect our female counterparts to stand. So I will make. Wherever you hear the M, our male counterparts, I expect you to stand. Correct? But if your friend confuses their gender, please be your brother's keeper and remind them if F is for female and M is for male. So let's try this and allow me to do it off the mic so that we're able to do it easier. And if you don't stand, also be your brother's keeper and remind them you fall somewhere on this spectrum. Yeah? Wangondu to give us her opening remarks. Miss Wanja, if you could just please take to the stage. A round of applause for her as she comes. Thank you.
Good morning, purely for you. And we come here on cultural tapestry and economic growth. You are a key contributor to our GDP, if you did not know, and more so to the youth's employment. Every time we turn on our radios, every time we turn on our TVs, you are the key people that we fight there, and we greatly appreciate you. So today, with us, we have artists who paint stories that we see all the time. We have musicians who awaken our emotions with your melodies, and the lighters who weave words into captivating tales, and designers who transform ideas into visual masterpieces. Your creativity knows no bounds, and it is my privilege to witness the magic that you create every day. I am a key fan of the prayers of this sector. As a chief manager of the Taxpayer Services Division within the Domestic Taxes Department, I stand here not just as a tax professional, but as a great follower of the arts. And I can't help but feel a surge of excitement in the air. So, colleagues, let's embark on this journey together, one where we engage, learn, collaborate to pave the way for a thriving creative sector that not only enriches our souls, but also contributes significantly to our nation's prosperity. And I wish to welcome you to a day filled with inspiration, innovation, and the promise of a brighter future for all of us. And to address this great occasion, it's now my singular duty and pleasure to invite the Deputy Commissioner, Policy and Tax Advisory to give her keynote address. Ladies and gentlemen, join me in putting your hearts together for our Deputy Commissioner, Madam Esther Wahome. Deputy Commissioner.
Thank you. Good morning. I'm happy to see you all this morning. Apologies, I think myself and Wanja are trying to juggle between one meeting to the next. But when she said there's a meeting of this nature, I thought it's a good opportunity to get to meet who it is that keeps us very engaged on social media and in other forums with your creativity. So I'm happy to be here today. As introduced by Wanja, my name is Esther Wahome. I head the Policy Division for Domestic Taxes. And I must say that for the longest time we had forgotten the creative sector in the taxation. So in this finance bill, we were able to remember you. I hope you're happy that we remembered you and made sure that we introduced something that, would directly help us in collecting just a little bit from your sector. I've been given a speech here by my good people. People in this sector have a way of keeping all of us entertained. So I'll try and read this speech as I give my notes as well. But I hope my name, Esther Wahome, is familiar. Is it? Yeah, but I don't look like that person, right? I must say maybe they stole my name, or whoever is older stole the other person's name. So I don't sing. I only make some joyful noise on taxation. So I try and create a bit of noise, and then when you come, then we resolve. But I'm really happy and honored to be in your presence today. Just an overview of what we do in the Policy Division for Domestic Taxes is that we deal with a lot of exemptions. That's one of our core mandates. An exemption from value-added tax, income tax, because some of you who have read the law are familiar with various exemptions that are available to our privileged persons, like the disabled, who should be encouraged amongst us. And I like saying that the law is very, lenient when it comes to disability. And even as you do your work, should you come across such people who are required to pay tax, then they need to know that there's
integrity is the seed for achievement. It is the principle that never fails. So with regard to the KRA integrity program, what have we done to be able to entrench integrity? There have been lots of complaints that the KRA has got integrity. We believe as taxpayers, we are very rich, isn't it? So what are we doing to address that? We've established a department. It was established some time back since 2013, and it was meant to ensure that we entrench integrity and ethics. So they say the department is called Intelligence, Supervision, Investigations and Enforcement Department, and we do lifestyle audits for our staff. We do investigations for taxpayers who don't abide to our policies. We do risk assessments, among other things. We also do what we call awareness creation. We create awareness to our stakeholders, our staff, about integrity, ethics. We also do, of course, besides that automation, I'm going to dive deeper on it a little bit. Automation is very key in our processes. Taxpayers charter, to spell out the rights and obligations of taxpayers. They said we do investigation. Staff who don't abide to our code of conduct, they always find themselves culpable. And also we have the KRA anti-corruption policies. For instance, our gift policy, we have a conflict of interest policy, among other policies that we have to be able to ensure that we entrench ethics and abide to the legal framework. Our 8th corporate plan is a lot of emphasis on integrity. As you can see, our key objective to address our goal to continue to build a performance-driven and ethical workforce is enhancing integrity. So ethics to us is very important. Very, very important. Our core values, what about them? Trustworthy, being helpful, being competent, being ethical, and being simple. Trustworthy, we are supposed to be trustworthy, not just KRA staff, even our stakeholders. Being helpful, going an extra mile to support our taxpayers and being customer-centric. Being competent, we are supposed to have requisite skills to address the current trends on taxes, on customs, among other things. Being ethical is very key also, and also simplicity. We are supposed to simplify our processes so that I'll be able to understand what we do, and that's why you're here. They'll be able to tabulate one by one. Creative sector, what is required, what can we do, how can we work together? So with regard to our department, as I said earlier, we gather intelligence, especially for those taxpayers who don't pay revenue. So we have our intelligence officers on the ground, whom their work basically is to gather intelligence, analyze, and then we disseminate for enforcement. Investigation division, as I said, we investigate violations of tax and customs laws in order to foster voluntary tax compliance for enhanced revenue. Ethics and integrity basically is mainstreaming integrity, ensuring compliance to anti-corruption policies. As I said, we do staff vetting for our staff. We do background checks for our staff. When there are complaints about them, they're living beyond their means, we always do that. Competent authority, basically we have to be in line with various treaties and conventions, so we work hand in hand with various global institutions with regard to exchange of information, especially on tax evasion. They said we do prosecution and enforcement also on violations of tax and customs laws in order to foster voluntary compliance. I'd say that earlier, and also complaints management. When we get complaints, we have to address such. So I don't want to delve deeper on this, but basically, with regard to the mandate of our department, also we do detection through surveillance. We always have officers doing surveillance on the ground. Execution of search warrant, we normally do search warrants, execute search warrants. We do disruptions through cancellation of tax compliance, TCCs, for instance, deactivation of PINs if you're not paying revenue, and also deterrence. So the 3 Ds are quite important to us: detection, disruption, and deterrence. So corruption, basically, we all know that it has affected our processes globally in Kenya, and the president is on the forefront to curb corruption. And we've been told, KRA, you must tell us what are you doing to fight corruption. That's why it's quite important for us to inform our stakeholders also what we are doing to curb and to combat corruption. So basically, this corruption name is not, it's not a new name to us. Basically, it means to destroy. It symbolizes breakdown of ethics and moral values, systems and institutions of governance social traditions, and personal values. And again, it can be systems-based or attitudes-based. And in terms of systems, of course, KRA does maintenance of systems, but able to tell us which system we put in place to curb corruption. And also, in terms of attitude, that's why we keep on training our staff to be ambassadors of integrity. So when there is opportunity, an inclination, and also pressure, it leads to corruption. And that's what happens in KRA. A lot of opportunities at times when we interact with our taxpayers. They want us to expedite their processes. They give our staff money. At times you need a tax compliance certificate. You know, there are pull and push factors. So there are pressure from all over. There are opportunities resulting to corruption and again also rationalization. So I don't want to delve deep on this, but I would normally relate it to what this guy called Stephen Powell says. When there is monopoly, plus dictionary power minus accountability, of course, when you don't have systems, it results to corruption. So there's need for us to uphold ethics and integrity in what we do. We need to have an accepted norm and standards that guides our work, be it creative sector, be it other businesses that we do. We need to uphold integrity and make the right choices in what we do. And also, we need to be honest when it comes to declaration of our taxes and our duties. We need to work with integrity and also succeed with integrity. And that's why we always urge our taxpayers to have what we call code of ethics in their institutions. Because when you have code of ethics, people that we supervise will be able to do the right thing, isn't it? Because there's something that guides them. Like in KRA, we have our own code of ethics. National values is also a program that you had Karano saying that we spearhead. So basically, my work in KRA is to create awareness to our stakeholders and also our staff about national values. We have 17 national values in the Constitution. And you heard the President saying that later time, we need to live the values that we have. So Article 10.2 of the Constitution talks about national values and the principles of governance. So we always report to the President, we report to Parliament, and also to public service. What are we doing as KRA to ensure that we live these values and we entrench these values? So we have to ensure that we train our stakeholders on these values. We create awareness, not even training, creating awareness for them to appreciate that we need to be patriotic, we need to pay taxes. National unity is quite important. Sharing and devolution of power, we have a rule of law adhering to various legal frameworks. Democracy, participation of people. As you are here, you are participating in our business. Human dignity, appreciating each one of us. Equity, social justice, inclusiveness. That's why we have you incorporated in our financial bill. Equality, human rights, integrity, very key. Non-discrimination, protection of the marginalized communities, good governance, transparency and accountability, and lastly, sustainable development. So we have these 17 national values that KRA always ensures that we are entrenching them in our processes. So the president from the lead is there. He said that I'll be the KRA ambassador in revenue mobilization during the 2022 awards. So probably next year we'll be rewarding the digital sector, the creative sector, for them by them being compliant. If we become compliant, we always reward our taxpayers. This month is Taxpayer Month. We are rewarding our taxpayers who've been compliant. So we are looking forward towards rewarding the creative sector. Also, my work is to create awareness. As I said, we use various mediums to reach out to our stakeholders, to our staff through webinars. And also, we normally have campaigns, roadshows. And here, part of my work is to tell stakeholders what are we doing to curb corruption, apart from investigations. How can you report corruption? So we work closely with ESCC and other government institutions. So here, remember it was last year, but when I was in Mombasa, I was in Kwale, I was all over, just creating awareness to our stakeholders about what is KRA doing to curb corruption, because that's what needs to be communicated. We have engagements, we just left, but also my work, I normally work with departments, and I task them to tell us, as a department, what are you doing to curb corruption? What are you doing to entrench integrity? So Wanja was just here, he's our chief manager. I was interviewing him early this year through KRA TV, And we reached out to so many stakeholders, telling them what are we doing as domestic taxes to curb corruption, to entrench integrity in our processes. Also, as I said, these on matters ethics and integrity have been very much passionate in KRA to entrench it, just talking to our stakeholders on the same thing. On customs also, we have revenue departments which are very key. On revenue departments, we target matters customs, revenue, and also trade facilitation. So also I talked to team leaders in those departments on customs. What are they doing to curb corruption in customs processes? And we had a very enriching engagement. Also, our KRA choir, during International Anti-Corruption Day, they normally sing anti-corruption songs, and also to urge our stakeholders to be people of integrity. These are just part of the initiative that we're trying to put in place, and also entrench them in our processes. Integrity works the same. We normally work with, of course, interreligious organizations, and creating awareness also to uphold integrity and to remind people to uphold integrity. I'm somewhere there holding a banner on integrity, and we had some other KRA staff around here. Do you know her? Of course, this is the former chairman of ESCC. Do you know her? Yeah. So, podcast also to champion integrity in KRA. Also, radio shows. These are my colleague here. We partner with other stakeholders, GIZ, just to uphold integrity. Then also training on customs and tax. I want to urge all of us to learn tax, to learn customs, and also your children to be, if they want to work in KRA, there's need for them to learn tax. So we are seeing hapa mambo ni matatu. Masomo yote ni online. Module ni moja kila mwezi na study pace ni wewe ujiamulie. So basically we're just urging people to have interest in matters tax, in matters customs. So I've mentioned all this, integrity policies. I talked about them later. I talked about them earlier. On anti-corruption policy, we have gift policy, conflict of interest policy, and also whistleblower policy. So basically on gift policy, we normally urge our taxpayers not to give our staff gifts. Why do you give us gifts, yet we are supposed to work? Our work is to support taxpayers. So we have that policy that says that. Whistleblowing policy, we urge our taxpayers to whistleblow, even our staff to whistleblow, and also KRA is zero tolerance towards corruption. So I've told you other things that we do, interact in terms of our social engagements, but automation is the key. Leveraging on cutting edge technology. And what have we done in KRA to leverage on technology? I'll just give you examples. We've automated our systems, and I'll go one by one. I don't want to, let me delve. I like pictures, because I'll go fast. We are all aware about iTax. You can file returns at the comfort of your homes. ICMS, Integrated Customs Management System, making trade easier. As I said, part of our work is trade facilitation. And I know at the comfort of your home also you can log into ICMS, work with clearing agents, clear goods, and we are reducing that, what we call interface, physical engagements. eTIMS, it was launched recently, and we've been championing for eTIMS, which is a software solution for sales and stock management. The solution provides transparency in invoicing, receipting, and stock management for taxpayers conducting commercial transactions. And we are quite aware about this because recently KRA was championing matters to do with eTIMS for taxpayers to be compliant. Those with business, saying stay on track with your VAT compliance, any business. So we're really championing for eTIMS. So we need to spread this gospel to our other stakeholders. TikTok, we have young people doing business and young people in creative sector. I know these are the part of the areas our team, even from tax education, marketing and communication, domestic taxes. TikTok is everywhere. So we are trying to show the fun side of taxes through TikTok, and us communicating messages through our vibrant digital media to our stakeholders. Something else also that KRA has leveraged on automation is RECTS, the Regional Electronic Cargo Tracking System. Basically, this is it's a web-based system that ensures monitoring of customs goods and all the goods that pass via the Northern Corridor to partner states. This RECTS system, it works in 2 countries, that is URA and also European Revenue Authority and also RRA, Rwanda Revenue Authority. So basically, we have our team that do what we call monitoring of these goods. In case there's any diversion or dumping, we are able to get feedback. So what normally happens, all the trucks passing by the northern corridor, to ensure there's no dumping and diversion of goods, we normally install transist goods with seals. So we normally install them with seals, and in case anyone tampers with these seals, we are able to get an alert, and we deploy our officers on the ground. They are called RECs, Regional Electronic Cargo Tracking System, RECs, and in RRUs, Rapid Response Unit, to mitigate what is happening on the ground. If there's an accident along the northern corridor or wherever, you always see KRA is always there. What's our work is to ensure that we protect those goods. We have our Revenue Protective Services, RPS, to protect the cargo. So in case anybody tampers with these seals, or maybe they are highway robbers, we normally get alerts. So we have a cyber command center, central command center here at Times Tower, and we have officers tracking all the cargoes passing by the northern corridor. In case there's any diversion dumping, we get alerts very fast. And these officers, they work day and night. They work in shifts just to ensure that they track goods. Because partner states were really complaining about their cargo being diverted, being dumped, being stolen. So you've seen these cars. Have you seen them? So they respond very fast. So when they get alerts here, we send alerts to them. They are all over along the northern corridor. They respond very fast to protect our revenue, our cargo. So benefits of RECs, basically reducing clearance time and cost of doing business. It used to take at most 21 days to move consignment from Port of Mombasa to Kampala. Before RECs, now it takes at most 4 to 5 days. That is efficiency, cargo security, transit accountability. One-stop border posts. KRA has really put in place measures to ensure that there is trade facilitation, to avoid delays, especially for people who do business. We are all aware about these borders. Busia, we have Tabeta, we have Holili, Lunga, Horohoro, Isibania. But again, we have borders. We have panya routes for smugglers. Smugglers don't want to use these one-stop border posts. They want to use panya routes like Luahaha, such like areas. So, of course, we do patrol at the borders. We have officers who do patrol at the borders to ensure that we don't have illicit goods coming to our country, yet we still have illicit goods coming to our country. Scanners, these are quite important because we are able to scan and we get real-time images to analyze what has been carried in that truck. Also, we have advanced cargo scanners that use radiology. When you go at the border post, you'll see these advanced cargo scanners. And basically, it's to reduce illicit items coming to our country. We do verification, physical verification, but at times technology is very key because when they do that scanning, we get real-time images. We have officers who do. They are images analysts. They're able to analyze what is in that truck. And in case it has carried illicit items, we do what we call interception. We intercept a good. Even in SGR, we do cargo scanning. We have officers who are placed there to do cargo scanning. Of course, handheld scanners, these ones we are quite aware about them. We have our four-legged officers. They do quite good work. These are our officers, of sniffing, of course, on narcotics. Pass activated doors, as you came through Times Tower, you saw these activated doors, basically to ensure that security is quite key in our processes. We do surveillance at the marine borders, just to ensure that we entrench integrity and ethics in what we do. So just to reduce illicit items passing via our water bodies. And also sealing of illegal routes. We work with multi-agency teams. There are places in Moyale. These borders are very vast. So we work with multi-agency team to seal some routes. Beside technology, we have to use other means or ways. So other strategic priorities that we are prioritizing in our processes is on automation is blockchain technology. Of course, KRA is yet to entrench blockchain technology. It's part of our 8 corporate plan initiatives, but we are yet to enforce that, machine learning, AI and also data mining. We do a lot of data mining, especially for taxpayers who don't pay taxes. Yeah, so just to wind up is on matters illicit trade. In creative sector, I don't know whether we have a problem of illicit items in your industry. And what are these illicit items is counterfeits. A lot of counterfeit goods, substandard goods, prohibited and restricted goods. So KRA is on the forefront to curb illicit. And what are these forms of illicit? Is smuggling, a lot of smuggling of illicit items, dumping, illicit cash flow, money laundering, and that's why our department is putting in place measures to mitigate all this. What are the enablers of illicit trade is the porous borders. People don't pay taxes because of maybe the porous borders, conflicts, the porous borders, high taxation rates. So these are just examples of illicit goods that have been able to, that we've sampled them, and also in terms of stamps, people don't use the right stamp. We are using fake stamps in our items. And that's why KRA does surveillance. So fake stamps are all over, from China, beverages, alcohols. So what does KRA do with regard to this? We do interception when we get intelligence. We do destruction of these goods. We happen to confiscate them. And areas that are prone to illicit is, of course, the Northern Corridor, all border counties, such like areas, very prone to illicit. JKIA entry points, exit points. So we urge all of us to report corruption through iWhistle. This is a web-based way of reporting matters of corruption, because automation is the key. You can report all forms of conflict of interest, fraud, diversion of goods, tax evasion, and your information will be treated with utmost confidentiality. So you can report via iWhistle at kra.go.ke. Or else you can write to us if you're not comfortable. You can write via that email, cac@kra.go.ke, corruption reporting at kra.go.ke. In person, we have our walk-ins, 26th floor, or any other KRA office. You can write to the Commissioner General, that's our address, or you can telephone us through that number, 0726 984 668, or 0709 017 700. That's our anonymous reporting toll-free number in case you want to report to us. Last but not least, we normally give our taxpayers or stakeholders, we normally reward them if they give us information. And our reward is, if you give us information, of course, for the creative sector, people are not paying taxes, and you're able to collect that revenue. We reward you with 5% of what we've been able to recover to a maximum of 5 million. So we have an informal reward for our stakeholders and for our taxpayers. We reward our informers. Said about that. So based on what I've said, we've seen that corruption is reducing in KRA because of automation and culture change. Initially, KRA was among the institutions in government that was the most corrupt. Now it used to be at 52.0%. And before then, we didn't put in place automation. We were just serving our taxpayers physically. But you see, through automation and culture change, attitudinal change, we were able to reduce. Now we are at 31.12 by 2023. So we normally do a survey. We interview our taxpayers and also our staff. Yes. So I'm done with my presentation. Do you have any question, any comment? On integrity, whereby we start with an integrity anthem, And then we finish with an integrity pledge. So I'm also teaching you probably what you can enforce or mainstream in your institutions. So all our KRA staff and also our stakeholders, we always urge them to at least learn one or two, three things from us. So I want to request us to stand up and we say this pledge. So for this pledge, you say your name and then we continue. So let's start. I, Carol Gitegi, for as long as I have life within me and the breath of God in my nostrils, my heart will not devise wicked schemes, my lips will not speak wickedness, my tongue will utter no deceit, my feet and hands will not rush into evil, my conscience will not reproach me, my righteousness will remain intact, I shall not deny my integrity. Thank you very much. I wish you well.
Thank you, Madam Caroline Gitegi, for those great introductions to our national values and corporate governance that we adhere to. I think you've learned we take our integrity very seriously, particularly with the integrity pledge. Allow me now, therefore, to call upon Chairman Roy to continue with his remarks. Roy.
Wow. I think those were mine. Very good. I think I'd said welcome to the stakeholders, and thank you to KRA for hosting us. My name is Roy Gitai. I will not be doing a presentation like that one. But the whole purpose of this meeting was to actually give a lay of the land. We've had the words collaboration, where we have had various teams in the creative economy coming to this very room to discuss the tax issues. But we've never had any concerted effort where the creative sector comes as one. People are coming in their own different things, so information is being repeated over and over again. And for that, we were saying we need to actually now start working together as members of the creative sector to work with the Kenya Revenue Authority. One of the things that we recognize government wants to do is, number one, facilitate the creation of jobs, increase income opportunities for people, and number three, also generate revenue for government itself. And that is the reason why we're here today. As a creative sector, we are looking to partner with the Revenue Authority to learn what are our obligations. With recent changes in the Tax Act, we've seen new laws coming in, some things that we were not even aware of. And so we would want to work with the Kenya Revenue Authority to first of all understand what are the obligations that are due to the creative sector. Number two, how can we be able to work together to help more sector players become compliant and to be able to pay their taxes without any difficulty? It is very good to hear that the Revenue Authority is moving from a stick kind of approach to a carrot approach, where you're incentivized to actually pay. But the thing is that has to be communicated. We need to be able to understand what are those issues that are policy related, what are those that are practice related, what are those that are legislative related, so that when we're working on solutions, we understand that everybody has a role to play. Whether it is us to learn more about taxation, where we can work with the tax-based expansion or tax-based education, to understand how to communicate. And I'm glad that your presentation, Madam, was quite colorful. That is the work of creatives, who are basically graphic designers. The people who composed your national anthem, well, should have been creatives. That was a song that was done before. But the thing is, the room has huge potential to be able to work together in terms of using the creative sector for purposes of education. On the part of counterfeit, one of the things that we've been looking at, and I've been saying, is that tax is a very formal process. All right, and one of the challenges is that you're working with 80% of this nation, where most of those businesses are informal. And so there's always that place where there are issues, where there's conflict. I was speaking to my friend Safari here, who I met this morning from KRA, from Customs. And I was saying, maybe in future as we continue working, many laws have been made to be able to catch people who are running away from. But when people begin to become compliant, I think it's time we also started reviewing some of those laws to actually see how it would be easier for them to be able to work with the taxpayers as they try to comply and build this great nation of Kenya. My role here is simple. Mine was to actually do the introduction between the creative sector and the Kenya Revenue Authority, this first meeting, where we can now be able to work together and say, what are the issues that have been raised? And some of those will be raised in the panel discussion. We have industry experts in that particular field, in the space of advertising, in the space of music, in the space of ticketing, in the space of film distribution, who will come and say what the issues that they have been having domestically and also trying to work internationally with the Revenue Authority. And I believe that is why we have excise, the people from Customs here. I think once that's done, the next step will be, are these all the issues? Then we'll be able to tell you that the creative sector is not just the traditional sectors that you have been knowing about. We break them down under UNESCO, WIPO, UNCTAD, where we have 9 different major categories, but there are other categories that are coming up, okay? And the thing is, how do we bring those into the fold? As we continue being dynamic in the creative sector with new avenues coming up, how do we introduce those new genres to the Revenue Authority in a manner that will encourage them? I'm glad you're also talking about incentives. The Deputy Commissioner also mentioned those. But the thing is, we also want to understand incentives in the light of how do those help us grow to become bigger businesses, more sustainable businesses that will generate revenue in future. So the whole point here is to actually work with these particular stakeholders. We're also accompanied by BRS, who is also one of our stakeholders as at work in trying to build formality in this particular sector through registration. We have Kenya bankers who are here. We had the State Department of the now new State Department of Culture, the Arts, and Heritage. The best thing that ever happened to me this week. To be able to show you that there is a process, there's a framework that has already been put in place to be able to improve monetization in the creative sector and revenue generation in that particular sector. So as we go along, I just want to state that this is the first meeting that we're having. In future, we should be having quarterly meetings with the Revenue Authority just to talk about different sectors and to see how best we can be able to work together, have education, capacity building that will then lead to people being sustainable taxpayers. With those few remarks, I say thank you, karibu sana, and welcome. Asante.
Thank you, Chairman Roy. On to the main reason why we're here today, to respond to the issue matrix that you sent to us earlier. And we'd just like to get into a panel conversation. We would like to have it in a two-parter. We are going to have our subject matter experts from the Revenue Authority side come up and respond to the specific issues received from the industry. Thereafter, we shall invite our critical stakeholders from the creative sector to join our subject matter experts now to expound and broaden the conversation to anything else that may not have been raised here, and so that we can hear what other challenges you're facing and probably give them context. Our hope today is that out of this, we shall have a genuine way forward where you find partnerships within Kenya Revenue Authority and you find that you have somebody who is a willing, able, listening, and caring partner. Allow me to call my 3 colleagues. They have different sets of skills, and I shall allow them to introduce themselves, where they're from, and what it is that they cover so that you know what to address where. Allow me to call my first panelist. That shall be Mr. Isaac Gideon Mumo. A hand for him as he comes to the front and joins me here. Isaac Gideon Mumo shall be joined by Mr. Safari Muley. A hand for Safari Muley as he joins me on this panel here. And last but not least, he shall be joined by Mr. James Okal. A hand for Mr. James Okal as he comes to the front, these front chairs over here. Thank you. So that we are able to get into the conversation of today. I know the criticism is that this is a manual, but worry not, we shall have gender balance shortly. But allow me to now give the microphone over to them so that they can introduce themselves and their various areas of expertise.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. My name is Isaac Gideon Mumo, and I'm deployed within the Department of Domestic Taxes, and I deal with domestic taxes issues ranging from what we call income tax, VAT, excise duty, and all the composites of whatever taxes that we collect within the domestic space. You must have heard about Domestic Taxes Department, right? Yes, that's one of our key departments within KRA, and we have various units that deal with those aspects of domestic taxes. There's one we call Large Taxpayers Office, where we have the large taxpayers who have big revenues above 1 billion in a year. We also have the Medium Taxpayers Office, and then the tax service offices, which serves now the taxpayers with a lower threshold of revenue. And that's where we handle most of the creative sectors. And there are also those who are in the creative industry, and they also fall within Medium Taxpayers Office and also Large Taxpayers Office. I'm glad to be here to share the aspects of this sector and how it interacts, or it should interact with taxation. Thank you so much.
Okay, good morning again. Okay, I'm James Okal from the Digital Economy Tax Office. I'm a digital economy tax expert. I will handle issues concerning digital economy tax, if you have, and also any issue concerning taxes like VAT or income tax under Domestic Taxes Department. So thank you.
Good morning. I think interact with you, it means that we should not be very formal. I'm not saying that we are not formal, but you know, this industry is the industry that makes us happy all the time. I'm privileged to be interacting with you this morning and in the late afternoon. It's a pleasure. My name is Safari Muley from Customs and Border Control, Trade Facilitation Division, a section called Remissions and Exemptions, where we deal with matters to do with incentives as per the prevailing tax laws. So we'll be sharing about that more. And also I'll be answering any question pertaining customs and border control in terms of importation, exportation. It's also a privilege that to interact with you. My wife is a music producer, so I'm in the right place actually to gain more knowledge also as we share. As you heard that from trade, we want to, of course, have many engagements with our taxpayers to ensure that they are aware of their obligations and also to correct us where we've gone wrong in terms of apply the tax laws. And this is a good session, and we hope for many more to come in this sector. Thank you.
Thank you, Safari. Around for Team KRA. Allow me now at this juncture to change the setup. I shall now call upon our industry stakeholders to come and join our panel so that they are able to expound on these particular issues we're about to go through. We have Mr. Leonard Nganga as he makes his way to the front. Please give him a round of applause. Joining Leonard Nganga shall be Ms. Trushna Patel. Please a round of applause for Trushna as she comes to the front. And of course, we shall be joined by none other than George Gashuhi. Please, a round of applause for him as he comes to the front. And they shall also be introducing themselves and their areas of expertise so that we are able to have a very meaningful conversation and dialogue as they expound on the particular issues that have been highlighted here today. Ladies and gentlemen, as mentioned earlier, today is our first of many engagements with the creative sector, and we are hoping that out of these engagements that we have, we truly do have solutions that are win-win for business. And you find that KRA is not only interested in collecting taxes, but in facilitating your businesses. Now, allow me to ask our panelists who just joined us to introduce themselves and their areas of expertise. Thank you.
All right. Good morning once again. So my name is George Gashui. I'm the co-founder of a platform called MOOC Africa. We're popularly known for ticketing, and so we've supported a lot of creatives who've moved into events as their revenue generation tool. We've seen quite a lot of jobs created over the last couple of years around the industry, and we've been part of conversations with other stakeholders across the creative industry to see how we can help to monetize other creative fields. I'm glad everybody at KRA said the creatives make them happy. I don't know if the creatives will say KRA makes them happy, because we are in an industry that doesn't make a lot of money for us to take home. And so what happens to the creative is your landlord is also like you, like KRA. They're happy to see us on TV, they laugh, but they also want cash at the end of the day. And there's a need for us to streamline how much cash. So there's a lot of opportunity for growth with the creative sector. And there are ways that the creatives can be supported to grow that to a point where, just like other markets we've seen globally, the creative sector can become a key contributor to the earnings or the revenue of the nation. The creative sector also holds a large part of our youth. So if you look at our average age of 19, if you compare the 19-year-olds who want to be creatives versus the 19-year-olds who want to be anything else that is currently paying revenue, there's a need to support what the next 5 or 10 years of revenue creation looks like. And so I'm happy to be here to see how we can contribute to that conversation. Thank you.
Hi. We've done a brief introduction, but I'll just go through it again. My name is Trushna Bhatte Patel. I've been in the creative business for over 25 years now, spanning from working as a film distributor, distributing international content into the African cinema exhibition realm. In 2011, I established my own company, and we continue to distribute to the region. We represent studios such as Warner Brothers, Walt Disney, and major Bollywood players. I also co-founded Yakwetu Online, which is a holding company that has started its first project, MyMovies.Africa, which is a streaming service to try and support African cinema, Kenyan cinema, for the Africans, for the Kenyans, and for the diaspora. This started off primarily because we were focusing on international content, where it got its audience in cinema, but there was nowhere to show Kenyan films or Kenyan content. And I'm looking at, this is a project we started about 10 years ago. Of course, we have other streaming services in the market now that are aggressively growing. But at that stage, there was none. Once a film was probably premiered, maybe in a cinema, the very next day it vanished. That was the scene. So we started that. We have that starter project going on. I also then we started a cinema in Donholm. It's a community cinema that is really to again focus on the residential area around Donholm, and to focus on not just showing international content, but we dedicate one screen to show Kenyan films. And the reason is that there is lack of visibility, which we are trying to grow so aggressively. I'm also a member of Partners Against Piracy, a lobby group. We're aggressively trying to work on piracy issues, as our ma'am put in her presentation. One of the biggest areas that us as creatives really face is piracy. We have some data. It may not be completely valid, but this is data that is collected from various sectors. And we believe that only 2% is legitimate revenue and 98% goes to piracy. So I think to our fellow colleagues today, my agenda is to really harp on piracy. And I think we need KRA's support, because that is taxed revenue that is being lost. And creatives are also losing on that 98% minus whatever tax, that they are so direly struggling to build funds to make content, are unable to pay their creatives. There are promises made of when the content is released that we will try and pay up. So it's a dire state of that creative industry, but they are still striving. I guess it's the passion that keeps them going. But I believe that is an important factor that needs to be considered. I'm also a member of Distributors Association of Kenya. We are a small institution. We're only starting out now. There is need for an association, because as distributors, our voices are not heard in the creative sector. So that is something that we're working on. We're all working together to build that, so that for the creative sector, we're able to establish a proper channel to try and amortize the content that comes out, and form policies such that we can amortize in the best way possible. The idea for the creative industry should be that they should be able to self-fund and not be able to always rely on donor funding or loans, which unfortunately are very prohibitive due to the rates. Thank you.
Hi, good morning, everybody, once again. My name is Lenny Nganga. I'm the CEO of Saracen Media Group, and also representing the Association of Practitioners in Advertising. This association covers at least 15 of the top advertising agencies in Kenya, and has been in existence, I think, from 1986. So one of the key things that we would really like to hear from you today is how much input does KRA actually have into policy when some of these tax rates are being set? Because one of the key problems that we have is, first, a lot of these taxes come into effect and there's no clarity around enforcement, collection, and compliance. And I'm very happy that we're having this session. It's a great initiative on your part to bring us all in here so that we can all understand this. Because the other part is some of these tax rates are set at a level which makes it very hard for any industry to operate in. For example, the advertising industry average profit margins as a percentage of revenue range between 8 to 10%. So when you set withholding tax at 5%, you're collecting like about 50% of our revenue up front, which leads to a situation where we always have a lot of refunds pending. And I would say in the case of my own company, we have had refunds pending for 3 to 4 years. And collecting these refunds is an extremely painful process. And every time you claim your refund, you get audited. Claim your refund, you get audited. So we're just wondering how this is going to change in any way whatsoever, and how we can get some clarity around that. And if you as KRA see these things happening, how do you input into policy?
Actually, I think that's a very good place to start, Leonard, because those are some of the things that we were supposed to cover, and possibly this could be responded to by Mumu, unless you want to give more context on this particular issue of auditing and refund, because that was an issue that was raised by the industry. Do you want to give more context, and then you can have Mumu come back on that?
Yes. I would say, like, for example, withholding tax refunds, you can only offset these against your corporate tax, which means at the end of your financial year, you've done your audits, you file your returns, and if you made a profit, then you can offset that against the withholding tax. In a year when you've not made profits, then that gets carried over. Then you apply for a refund. Then you're told before the refund is given, you have to be audited. Then you're audited, and then the refund, and I'll say, like in the case of my company, the refund is put into the system, it's there on iTax. But you're told, unfortunately, Treasury does not give us enough money to pay you your withholding tax refunds. So all this money is coming out of the cash flows of the companies because this is the services that you've rendered, and the money is being held. So we have to end up sometimes borrowing. And it's costing us money in terms of interest rates just to keep operating. And it becomes a very expensive exercise for us. And then we start getting questions later. Why has your PAYE gone down? Why is your VAT going down? But it's because the business is not sustainable in that kind of scenario where a lot of your money is being held in refunds.
Thank you, Bwana CEO. And perhaps just to have a build-up of how refunds come into being, or rather, allow me to start from the point of trying to appreciate what withholding income tax is. Whenever you have a transaction that within the Income Tax Act has been described to be of management, professional, sort of agency. You've also mentioned about advertising, which from July 2023 will now be attracting withholding. Then what the Act talks about is that under Section 35, the non-residents and also the residents will be required, anyone who is actually paying for that service, to actually withhold. Residence rate is 5%, non-residents is 20%, and depending on whichever array, like interest, dividends, and all others. But I'll come to just pick out advertising, for example, as part of what it is that you do. So that is 5% that is being withheld by the person who is paying you. And this is an aspect of the tax regime that actually helps the taxman to be able to determine or to be aware of the people who are doing that business. The person who is soliciting for their service and the person who is actually offering the service. Now, when withholding comes in, it is just a matter of, I was supposed to pay you 100,000, and the tax law requires you to deduct 5% and remit through a certificate, which is like your tax that has been paid upfront. So how does it work? The 100,000 that I'm ready to pay for the service that I actually enjoyed from Bwana CEO there, then I give 95% check amount to Bwana CEO, and the other 5% I give it to KRA. Once KRA acknowledges through the iTax system, I generate a PRN which has my PIN and the PIN of the service provider. Then there is a generated document which is called a withholding tax certificate, which actually comes to your account as an advance tax. So at the end of the year, you'll find that you've dealt with 10 or 20 people who have actually withheld your money, 5%. So you got 95,000, and on top, a 5,000 worth of a certificate, which is in your tax account. So when you are declaring your annual turnover, for the purposes of having the income statement where you show the sales, the expenses, the purchases, and then the gain or the amount that is now taxable, then once you tax that amount, you realize, for example, that a taxpayer CEO has tax to pay of 300,000. The system will first remind you that you have already had withheld taxes with us. So that 5,000 plus those others, maybe they come to around 200,000. And the taxable amount, the tax payable from your computations, which is called self-assessment, you saw it was 300,000. So the system will ask you to pay the difference, which is 100,000. Now, for income taxes, you may realize that your taxable amount, maybe because you had maybe a startup cost or even expenses that are also allowable, that were able to go beyond the sales that you actually made, and therefore you are at a loss position, then you're not supposed to pay a tax under income tax. So instead of having the 300,000 payable, maybe you have 0 or 50,000, while the withheld certificates total to 200,000. Then now you get yourself into a refund position. That KRA has taxes that have been withheld from you, from the people that you're trading with, and they are 200,000, and your taxable position shows that you have a tax to pay of 50,000. So now you have a refund of 150,000. Then what happens? The Tax Procedures Act provides you to be able to utilize that 150,000 in various ways. The first one is an outright application for a refund. And once you do that, the system will initiate a refund process. And this refund process is going to be sent to our refunds department, which will actually be able to contact you and ask for documentation for you to support and prove in what modality or ways you actually found yourself in a refund position. The other way you can utilize it is, of course, to say, I would want to this refund of mine to be utilized to pay another debt that KRA says, or rather the account shows that I'm actually supposed to pay this sort of a tax. In the last 2 years, the refund process has actually been more worked on in terms of simplification. And you realize that by the time you have a valid refund to apply, then as long as it has been embarked on, it is supposed to be given a feedback within 90 days. So we don't have an issue in terms of how long the refunds are going to take, as long as you provide the requisite documentation. The biggest problem in refunds process is where you find, yes, I have the 150,000 refund that I'm supposed to be given back, KRA, but I'm not able to produce the documents to actually show my sales and my expenses were actually bringing to a refund position of this. Or these people actually withheld this amount of money from me, and because we did this sort of a business, and at the end of the day, my sales were not as much as my expenses would provide. So my advice on that would be, in a good environment where you are able to keep track or other documents that actually would show your sales, would show your streams of income, that would show your streams of expenses, and the incurrence that is actually related to that sort of revenue generation, then no one, absolutely no one, should deny you that amount. Just to finish it up, when we talk about refunds, as an agency, we are given directives or a budget from now the Treasury. And Treasury will avail some amounts that this amount of money is the one that is available for refunding. So you find after being processed, then you are going to be kept in a queue that now will be looking at what funds are available from the Treasury and not from KRA, because our process ends there once we approve and it is ready for payment. And as I've said, you can utilize that refund in various ways. Ask for it to be refunded in cash, which is actually done. And for the people who deal with floriculture and such, exporting and such, they really get their cash flows right, left, center, as long as they can be verified. And you can also opt to utilize it to offset another KRA debt that is within any other tax obligation. Thank you.
Thank you very much for the answer. The one about offsetting against other taxes, that's been a problem. We've actually asked for it and we're told it has not been operationalized yet on iTax, so we can't.
Thank you for that. That is a new development that we are having. The one I can confirm right away that is working is what we call installment adjustment voucher, where in the event that you have paid income tax via installments, and at the end of the year, the installments are more than the tax that you're supposed to pay, you are given an installment adjustment voucher that will cushion you in your subsequent year automatically, such that you will not be required to pay any other installment unless until you exhaust that one that a voucher has been provided. That one is operational under iTax. The other one, as you say, is a process that is underway within our debt division, and very soon is going to be operationalized for the purposes of knocking off. Thank you.
So we really look forward to that one, because the advertising agencies that we represent have close to £500 million shillings being held in withholding tax.
Okay.
Maybe before we leave the withholding tax segment, there's a question here that asks that in case a client has already deducted the 5% withholding tax but fails to provide a withholding certificate, what steps can individuals in the film industry take to inform the Kenya Revenue Authority about the tax deduction, and how can they rectify this situation? Is it even possible for somebody not to have a withholding tax certificate to begin with?
Yes and no. And this is what happens. Let me pick the example of Bwana CEO there. You find that he has been able to provide services to KRA itself. And when KRA is paying Bwana CEO, KRA gives CEO the 95%. And they tell CEO, look here, we are going to send you the withholding certificate. But maybe, by design or by default or even forgetting or something, or an error somewhere, or even by an aspect of cash flow planning, someone never effects that 5%. In such a scenario, CEO will have had their 95% amount, but the 5% has actually not come even through a certificate. So it may happen. In such a case then, what can KRA do? KRA is also limited in terms of intervening in the business processes. Because by the time you are, for example, soliciting for the service and agreeing on what to supply and what not to supply, KRA may not have a hand into it. But from the perspective now of you dealing with a transaction of two people, maybe when someone has not been able to provide that certificate, you are able to provide evidence that you actually traded with this person and they were able to pay you lesser amount and such kind of a thing. Yes.
Maybe clarify something. So what you're seeing happening, especially with the creative sector, which is, so you'll pay who is supplying them, also gets paid minus a 5% for them to keep cushioning the 5% they didn't receive power to hold, which might be the people who are withholding but not issuing a certificate. So me, I'm a provider. I've often told we've held 5%, right? Because they were held.
The existing 20th. Then as a taxpayer, you need to contact the institution, and if they are not giving you any response, you can actually get in touch with KRA. For the purposes of KRA acknowledging that there is a transaction, you actually have been paid, and that deduction, the certificate has not come out. And I would actually now also try to advise the sector. You can still come up and, using your consolidated efforts, be able to petition for a law that will now take care of what if the person who deducted from me has not been able to give me the certificate. Do I have any recourse? Or do you have a channel now that you can use just to make sure the certificate comes on time? But the duration has been reduced to try and push.
So I just wanted to ask, so in this case, we're saying the honors is on this, I remember this guy is struggling to earn that 30, right? So you're asking me to get into a fight with my agency over a tax certificate, right? And I need them to give me work next week, the week after. But me now, I'm saying, if by next week I don't have a tax certificate, is your recourse that they owe me back the 5%, I will declare it myself? Or I'm sending I know we've moved from enforcement to service, but I'm sending the watchdog on you. So is it get my 5%, or is it you owe me my full amount and I will declare my own tax? So as the creative, what should be my position? Because I want to be compliant, right? So my assumption is that when agency X holds my 5%, I have been compliant, right? They've paid my tax. So me now I'm good. So if they don't pay it now, it comes back to me to make sure, or is there a way that we can know these are KRA certified collection agent? This is supposed to withhold my 5%. Is there a way for us to be able to verify that?
To answer the last part is that for the services that are under Section 35, everyone who is a payer is actually called upon to withhold. The only catch is that within a month, they look at revenue, which is 24,000 and above. So if, for example, you're dealing with 10,000, 20,000 within a month, then that is not subjected to withholding. It's also good to know while you're invoicing what position you take within that transaction. That's number one. Then number two, we are looking at income tax, which is reportable every year. So if you're dealing with maybe transactions for a month and they have just paid you something, you are 95%, I think you have the next 11 months to try and petition them to actually provide that certificate. I'm not saying that just to support their laxity, but since we have shortened the days, then I would look at it like if you, you can agree, because these are institutions, they are also, managed by people, and they also may be having their issues. If you can agree that, for example, we're going to deal with you, and after every third or fourth or fifth transaction with you, you make sure you process all our certificates or such kind of a thing, then that will be quite okay, even though withholding certificates are based on every singular transaction. Is that better?
I think you have an opinion on this?
Mine is not really on the process. It's the complication of how all these taxes are assigned. Creatives generally don't have financial backgrounds. They are also not aware of, a lot of these legislations and tax laws, etc. And for business people, we are subjected to millions of different types of taxes, very time-consuming, cash flow tight, as my colleague mentioned as well. But for creatives, these are things that they don't understand. Theirs is a very simple thing. They've created some content, or they're doing commissioned work, and they want to be paid for it. Where the tax matter comes in situations like where George mentioned about they are working with an agency who is regularly giving them work, and to penalize them and say, you have not paid my tax on my behalf, I need that paid. They could easily say, well, we'll work with somebody else. It's a tough world out there. So isn't there a way that KRA can consider or look at how this entire taxation policies are? Because there are little taxes. I mean, if I look at our business, for example, there's VAT, there is withholding VAT, there is withholding tax, there's income tax, there is PAYE, there's what else? I'm losing a track of it, but there are at least about 10 different taxes that we have to consider from the 1st to the 30th of the month. And it's getting more and more complicated, whereas we have to hire resource to sit 24/7 just looking at taxes. Now, a creative does not have that freedom to have a team of a taxman, an accountant, etc., to follow this through. They have to do it themselves without formal financial knowledge. So it does deem very, very complicated. People in the creative industry are also very peculiar, from my experience. They are not a 9-to-5 person. Creatives generally work best at night, early morning. They have weird times than the rest of the office 9-to-5 people do. And therefore, they're not even able to tackle. So when this creative thinks about this challenge at middle of the night, who is he going to call and ask, so tell me, how do I solve this? You understand? So there are obvious challenges that creatives need to be looked at in a different way. The rule book may not apply, and therefore there'll never be a solution, sadly, for them, unless they are to now employ professionals who will then help them service that. But can they financially manage that? We all know how the creative industry really struggles financially, because the money isn't there. As I mentioned earlier, 98% is taxless pirated revenue. They're not getting it. People who have not worked hard on that content are the ones earning on it. So, it's a tough world out there.
I hear you. And look at it this way. In the context of maybe, let's take like a family, like an entity. And you may be hearing, depending on perhaps where you come from, or the background or the setup of, where you've been brought up. A family has something like a family lawyer, a family doctor, those kind of things. This just shows perhaps there's some credence or priority that is actually given to aspects of health, aspects of law, and such kind of things. Why am I bringing this up? Because taxation, actually, whenever there is an aspect of business and cash flow and generation of what you call gains or profits from engagement, then taxation aligns itself around the same. And my advice would be, in the industry, for example, as you bring up the 19-year-olds that George was talking about, as you bring up their platforms in terms of enabling them to be able to come up with content that can, give them money, that can resort to earnings and all that, could you in a way embed some financial knowledge, some taxation just aspect, so that they can learn as they move forward that for sure we have the tax aspect here that will look sort of parallel, be running towards what it is that you bring into the activity of generating that revenue. To just help them so that it doesn't look as complex as it seems, because once they start learning it from the onset, then they will be giving it some aspect of maybe saving, expenses, revenue, investments, and such. But there's some taxes somewhere. That could really help. Why? Because there's no revenue that comes without expenses. There's no revenue that comes without investing. There's no revenue that just comes from any other place. Even when you are betting to actually hit a jackpot or something, you're actually investing something, is it? So for creatives, my call would be, as we propagate our heroes to try and earn something from their creativity and their talents and all that, could we also partner together so that they can be able to understand the way we make sure that we hone them to try and learn some good financial management skills like savings and investings. When they get some money, then taxes would actually require you, when you earn this, please declare this. There's a return. You have a PIN. You need to make your accounts and show us that you're actually generating this amount of money and someone is withholding from you, and at the end of the day, this is the gains and profits that you're actually supposed to pay some taxes. Why? We all share the nationality of our country. And the biggest reason here is just to make sure everyone is able to chip into this nationality that we are all proud of. For the purposes of them just appreciating that if you keep those books quite correctly and okay, then taxation will never be an issue. Even if you're not able to actually get an accountant, like now the ones I was talking about, the family accountant, or even another consultant who is somewhere, then you can try and reach out. Through our offices, we have officers who would actually try and advise you. You will fall into this bracket. Do you have employees? Then you may need payee, because as you pay them, you need to deduct this. Do you have something like a turnover of 5 million and above in a year? Then you will require an ETIMS for the purposes of having ETR, so that Nation Media Center, Standard Media Group, or any other agency will be requiring an invoice from you that actually has ETR and such. So that's something we can try and bring it on board so that we don't just leave our people to embark on that career path without having those knowledges. And we are ready to actually do that.
Thank you. And I like what you brought in, this element of financial management. We actually have in our audience a member of the Kenya Bankers Association, and I'm sure he'll be happy to take us through some financial management for their members. However, you had mentioned the issue of investment, and I want to broaden the conversation into the equipment that our various media owners who we have on the panel look into. That, and this one probably will be handled by Safari Mulay, but we shall look to Trishna to maybe give us a better context. And this is in the issue of the importation of film equipment, that in the light of the high tax burden, associated with importing film equipment into Kenya, what policies or measures can be developed to support the growth, innovation, and competitiveness of the film industry while ensuring fair tax collection? And even to add on to that, there has been the issue that many foreign filmmakers choose South Africa over Kenya due to more favorable tax policies. So how can Kenya attract and retain foreign film productions, ensuring that the film industry thrives and contributes to the expansion of the tax base for the country? Maybe you want to give a bit of context on that, and I know we'll hear from someone in the audience on it. And then Safari, you can respond, but let's start with Patel.
Sure. Importation of equipment relating to film or film exhibition, etc. And so we're looking at direct production equipment for filming. And then we're looking at equipment for setup of cinemas, for example. You know, the projectors, the entire DCI compliant projection system needed to set up in a cinema is extremely expensive. And the duties are extremely high on them. Everything has to be imported. There's very little that Kenya can manufacture for what a cinema setup needs. So I would probably say 70 to 80% of it has to be imported. When you look at that cost versus what the likely revenue stream is, because of the obvious challenges around the economy, piracy, and then, you know, these cinemas need to be in shopping malls that are busy footfall area, so it's high rent. Amongst all that, you know, they cannot operate. I mean, they cannot operate on a feasible income. As a result, in a population of 55 million or so in Kenya, we only have 13 cinemas with an annual admission rate of about 1 million people in cinemas, and the assumption is that it's 250,000 people watching 4 movies in a year. That is dismal statistics, yeah, and bulk of it is consumed with the international content, because the Kenyan content, either the frequency at which it is releasing is not adequate enough to continue the supply flow that cinemas need. And secondly, there is an audience that wants to watch it in cinema. One, because they're able to pirate, or the quality is not substantial enough. So the filmmakers are compromising on the equipment they use or the talent that they have to use. They're unable to pay their creatives. It's like a borrowed scenario to make a film. The end result is it's not comparable to an international film, and that's partly to do with the equipment. Either it's available and it's very expensive locally, or they have to import it, and the taxes that they have to pay are ridiculous. I distribute across Africa, and there have been initiatives in Rwanda, there have been initiatives in Tanzania, where this equipment has actually been subsidized up to 70 or 80%, in some cases 100%. There was a period where there was a grace period provided for 100% waiver if they were to bring in, and there was initiatives to try and build more cinemas, for filmmakers to make more films. The ecosystem could develop together. And that lacks, unfortunately, which is a big blow. So we're not really jump-starting or getting anywhere in terms of the film industry concerned. The latest wave is the OTT platforms are commissioning content, and so there is money being pumped in, but it is for a platform that is generating revenue in Kenya. But as far as taxes are concerned, there's a lot of gray areas, which, obviously, I am not a financial person, so I can't pinpoint to that, but I know very well that I pay taxes and I know how much they do. So it pinches to a Kenyan who is trying to do business in the legitimate way, pay all the taxes, be compliant, but then is being beaten up to other medias that don't have the same rules that apply. So there are multiple ways in which we as Kenyans are struggling because of that. If these tax waivers are provided or concessions are provided, it is obviously encouraging the entire ecosystem to build. You have the filmmakers making films at better rates or at better quality, depending on what they can afford. Then you have them being consumed on local platforms, in cinemas, in outdoor medias. There's a lot of potential, but unfortunately we're all stuck by the fact that we cannot generate that revenue. And it all boils down to also heavy taxes, which makes the consumer's cost of consuming that content higher, which does not help. Our cinema in Donholm struggles because the target audience we had looked at pre-COVID today have lost jobs, are on half pays, are struggling. They're on a day-to-day salary. Would they prioritize going to a movie, entertain themselves? No, they want to live. They need food on their table. They need to get their kids through school. So there are hard challenges that are not letting the cinema perform. But there are steady taxes that have to be paid. The ticket price is not prohibitive as a result. If we were to lower it, then we're left with nothing to really even sustain. I mean, we're not able to sustain currently. It's a deficit scenario. But we're hoping that if things improve, then that would help. But this is the whole eco chain that is being affected. There are several countries also who provide VAT concessions on substance films or impact films, which have a message. They are patriotic. They could be an important message that they're going out to give to the public. Their VATs are waived off, where it allows now the consumer to spend 16% less to be able to consume the same content. And by that value, you are actually encouraging the filmmaker to at least get some reward back. So there are several of these elements, but overall, basically, as a taxman, there has been no reach out to say, we want to help. I know these taxes are a lot, but how can we try and see that we have certain time frames to allow growth of this industry? As I keep going back, I'm concerned about that 98% as a business person, really. And that 98% involves me as well, earning some revenue out of that, not just the content owner. So we have been struggling with different bodies to work towards piracy, but we don't see KRA's involvement in anything. Yeah.
I'm sure, Safari, you've had the trade facilitation concerns, and I'll throw the domestic concerns to Okal. But even as you respond to the trade facilitation concerns, maybe you could elucidate if there are any existing or proposed tax exemptions for the film gear and equipment in Kenya, and how filmmakers can take advantage of these exemptions as you respond to the context that Ms. Patel gave us.
For the issues highlighted. One, I would want to state that KRA is an agency of the government, and our place in that position is that we implement the available tax laws which guide on the different matters of taxation. So in terms of the importation of the filmy equipment, the relevant taxes applicable, of course, are set out in the different tax laws, if it's matters to do with the import duty. There is the East African Customs Community Management Act, which prescribes the different rates of duty for the different types of equipment, same to the VAT and same to the IDF and RDL. Of course, these are laws which have been developed in the country to guide in taxation, not in the film industry alone, but also other sectors of the economy. So one would be, I know the issue that is being raised is that these taxes are high, but what is KRA's position in this is that it's not KRA who developed these particular laws. Of course, there are the other bodies who are involved in the development of such policies, and KRA is also a member of these particular bodies who develop the same. So where we come in is that just to give our input on the same, And I know, of course, this should be picked at a higher level, that this is the concern being raised by the film industry. And I know this is not the last, it's not the first or last forum, but we'll have more engagement. I know we'll have matrix of issues going up even to the policy level, where these things are determined. So in terms of to do with the heavy taxation, we may not comment at this, but this can be handled at a policy level. Number two is that what would be the available incentives to the Kenya film industry? I think the VAT Act provides for a provision of exemption of VAT on goods imported by the Kenya film industry and the agents. But of course, this is regulated by the Kenya film industry, who need to recommend for that exemption. And then it is subject to approval by the Kenya National Treasury. So that is a process that, one, you need to engage the Kenya Film Association, who recommends that, and then it goes now to the Kenya National Treasury for approval, then to KRA for implementation. Of course, the importation process follows. If there is an issue on the importation process, we may be able to clarify that. I think that's it. I don't know whether I've answered the whole issue on the issue of the importation, Karan. Oh, okay. Yeah, there are two issues here. The issue of where film equipment is coming temporarily into the country and leaving the country. I know this is a thorny issue. Of course, what happens is that, as per the law, is that even if this equipment is coming temporarily, there should be security to Zakayo that this equipment will leave the country. And as such, the current process is that when you are temporarily importing an equipment to the country, which will later leave the country, you need to place a security that will cover for the taxes associated. I know those taxes are huge because these equipments are very expensive. When I was sharing with your chair, that of course the security bond to that taxes will be a higher value, but that is the law as it is right now. But what needs to happen is that these are engagements that we need to continue with, because law is made for us, and anything that can assist the industry in terms of achieving its mandate, this is something that can be listened to, and at a level that, at the policy level, where now we need to check if there is no bond or security bond to this equipment, what other security? Remember, these are goods coming to the country, either being brought by foreigners. How are we convinced that they will go back? Those are now the discussions that we need to have. We also have the issue of equipment, which is registered in Kenya and going out there to film and then come back. That has no issue. What needs to happen is that there are different types of processes. If this equipment is going back and coming the same it was in an altered state, of course, what needs to happen is just the relevant documentation, the customs document. So you just engage a clear agent to lodge an entry for you, a customs entry, to facilitate the good to go out. And then when it's coming back in an altered state, of course, the same process will happen. But you ensure that what you've taken out in terms of the product and the marks and numbers is the same one coming. Because if you change anything, that means this is a different kind of product and taxes may be called for. Of course, if there will be alteration, the value addition, of course, taxes payable on the value added. I think that's it, Karanu.
Actually very concise. And probably Okal, you could come in and respond to some of the domestic issues that were raised by Ms. Patel.
Thank you, Karani. I think the film industry, the way they have addressed, they have so many issues. And one of the issues from the statement is the lack of awareness or education on how to treat different taxes. And this one, I think, can be done through education and of the members of that sector. And also, we have a stakeholder engagement in KRA, so you can always reach out so that we take your members through the awareness. Then the issue of piracy. We have been informed that only 92% brings revenue to KRA. 98% is piracy. So I think the issue of piracy, you can handle it also. When you liaise with our department, I think you saw Madam Gitegi doing presentation on ISO. We have an intelligence department, so we can liaise with ISO, and also to see how we can go about the issue of piracy, which affect our revenue. Then also we have the issue of we always have public participation, whereby members of the public, especially maybe the film sector, you are called upon maybe to give your view before a tax is passed by a parliament. The way Gideon has said, some of these are beyond us. You know, KRA, we implement what has been passed by parliament. So when you are not there, you just find there's another tax which has been introduced. So it is very important for members of the film industry and all members of the public to come during public participation and give your views. Like right now, I think we have the national dialogue, whereby I think it was a CFO. It was proposing that we collapse all these taxes and we come up with one tax called pay as you spend. So this one will help in the social sector and also the economy. So it's a roadmap strategy to 2027 for taxation. I think that's my submission.
Well, we have you, Mr. Okal. I know you're an expert on matters of the digital economy. There are several questions that are linked to the digital economy, and I'd just like to lump all of them up because I know there's a framework for that already. And some of the questions that came is, art accumulates value when sold as an art at auction. Is this subjected to capital gains tax, and at what rates? And right off with that is, crypto is becoming a preferred mode of payment to my gamers outside the country. How does KRA tax crypto? And there's also a question of an NFT, non-fungible tokens. So should I declare an NFT revenue if the government does not understand what it is? Is it really true we don't understand what NFT is?
Thank you, Karani. I think I will start with that one of cryptocurrency. Can KRA tax crypto and how? KRA tax crypto through the Finance Act 2023, whereby there was a tax introduced called digital asset tax. So this digital asset tax touches on cryptocurrency, cryptography, and even the non-fungible tokens, what is called the NFT. So it is 3% of the exchange value on the platform of the crypto. So, and this tax should be remitted within 5 working days, and it also is submitted by the platform owner. So KRA tax that the cryptocurrency through the DAT, digital asset tax, and the effective date is 1st September 2023. So somebody should not tell you that KRA is not aware about NFT. We are aware. The second one was about, Karani, remind me? The CGT.
CGT on art, we've tackled crypto and NFT. Maybe specifically comment on NFT.
Yeah, that one is repetitive. So it was number what? Okay, I bought an art auction. I want to sell the same art on the same auction for a higher value. Am I subject to capital gain tax? Is there a separate rate for art? I think it will be subject to CGT, but there are exemptions. The first is whether the collection was treated as a business or whether the collection was a trade. So it is subject to CGT at 15%, but prior it was 5%.
Thank you. Let me just chip in on the art. The aspects of arts, especially for the display and also generating revenues that people have to maybe bid for them and get really high value in terms of someone who is securing that piece of art. And I believe that's the genesis of the question. So if, for example, it's placed at a place like a museum or on a platform that people can bid and say, I can give 250,000 for that, I can give $500,000 for that, or even $1 million. Then now that art ceases from the classification of just being done as a hobby or for display purposes, and now moves in to get into an aspect of trade where now it is going to fetch in some income to the person who is actually the bona fide beneficiary. So once we reclassify that, then now we look at the aspect of trade into it. Trade into it will then look or approach it in two perspectives. Are you the person who is responsible for the sale, or the have you given it to an entity like the platform or the museum to sell it on your behalf? If it is about someone who is selling it on your behalf, like a platform or a museum, then they will be responsible for collecting what you call a royalty. Once they give you the amount of money that you're actually supposed to, and royalties in Kenya are, for residents, they are taxed at 5%, non-residents at 20%. So a royalty will swing in. And this 5%, I'll take it back for utilization through the CEO's example, which we were talking about, the withholding, because a royalty is a form of a withholding. So at the end of the year, you have your 1 million income, and then you generated expenses, maybe on hiring that platform, on paying the museum, on advertising, on doing what, then you remain with 100,000 of gains from this piece of work. Then you tax 100,000 Kenya shillings at 30%, for example, that is 30,000 supposed to be paid. Remember the 5% based on the royalty that was deducted, knock it off, then you have tax payable or even refundable. That's how you deal with such. If it is a repetitive thing that you actually do, then it means you are in charge yourself, you are in charge. And because it is your pieces of work that you're actually presenting for sale, then it means you are not going to deduct from yourself the withholding. Withholding comes when you just bring in another person. So because you can't now deduct from yourself, or even tell the person who is buying and they are in USA or South Africa or Nigeria, for example, then they cannot deduct and give the money to KRA. So it is you who will collect the entire amount. Then you declare it using the normal P&L income tax approach, where you say, these are my revenues and these are my expenses and this is my gain. Therefore, I tax myself through a self-assessment. This is the amount I'm supposed to pay. Hope that is better. Yes, so in such a scenario, for CGT, which we call capital gains tax, under the income tax law, then we leave it to what we call now property, something that you will actually make without any intention of putting it for trade. You don't want to monetize. You don't want to translate this so that it becomes a trade venture for you. Then now we leave it for property, which is now in any other way described for the purposes of things like land, or even building, or even crop vegetable, trees, standing timber, and all that, that are permanently affixed to that land, that will classify in that category. Thank you.
Well, we're on that, Mumo. There's a question here that my products are given to an association to sell on my behalf, and the products are sometimes sold, while other times the buying country keeps the products to send the money where they sell. Why do I pay tax and I'm not sure if the product will come back? So issues of consignment.
Good question. Now, under VAT, and when I say VAT, I want to presume that most of us would be understanding. You register for VAT if your transactions for a year are above 5 million in terms of value, and also the aspects that you are dealing with, like the services that you do, the goods that you offer attract VAT. There's a VAT Act 2013 which was operationalized from 2nd of September 2013, that deals with goods and services that actually are chargeable to VAT. You go to the first schedule, where we have the exemption. And that's why, where my colleague Safari was talking about, paragraph 54 of that act will actually say, if you are buying filming industry, whether local or even importing, and it has been approved by the CS who is responsible for film activities in Kenya, then absolutely you're not going to pay any VAT. Whether you buy it from town here or you're importing it from Dubai, that one, get approval, no VAT. Then you go to the second schedule, we have a listing of items that we call zero rated. Those zero rated, they attract VAT as 0. Now, let's come back to our moderator's question, that I am supplying items to an association so that they sell them on my behalf. Then when I push stocks to them, I want to presume something like curios or such. Then they would say, your curios here are worth 10 million, and you're supposed to declare that there's a supply. A supply under the Act is actually defined, and time of supply comes to be given a strict definition, and it has 4 aspects. Whenever you make or generate an invoice, whenever you actually do the actual delivery, whenever you produce what we call a certificate in contractual jobs or services, and finally, whenever a payment is actually made, whether in full or in part. And this is Section 12 of the VAT Act. It actually says the earlier of those 4 scenarios. So you may have given stock, yes, you have actually made a sale under the VAT Act. Interestingly, we come back to Income Tax Act. Income tax, which doesn't deal with VAT, just says that the modality of accounting for revenue is actually what we call accrual basis. Accrual basis is whenever an action of sale has actually occurred, whether you have been paid or not, then you're supposed to describe that as a transaction that within the year of income, that supply amounts to a turnover, whether you have been paid or not. In the event that you are not paid 2 or 3 years down the line, then the Act also allows you to come and claim back the amount that you actually paid, and it has turned to be what we call a bad debt. So accrual works in income tax, and under VAT, we have the 4 options for supply. The last one, which is under TOT. TOT is turnover tax. Turnover tax has been a regime for the sectors that are below 15 million, 25 million as we speak, and below. Sales volumes that don't go past that. And you don't want to be counted under the income tax regime where you have to declare at the end of the year. So what do you want? Over a simplified regime, which is called TOT. And TOT was raised the percentage from 1% of turnover to 3%. And this is effective, brought in by the Finance Act 2023. The 1% had been slotted in during the COVID relief protocols in 2020. You remember that time? And a lot of people actually were opting using that one. And that return is actually remitted every month. And once you do that, the 3%, then it is final. You're not supposed to declare any other thing. So it is for you to choose. The small-time business people are actually more than ever advised to join the TOT because it's a simplified regime that would take care of one-off payment, 3% based on your turnover, and you are done with the taxman. If you then opt to go for the end of the year under the income tax regime, then you'll be declaring your annual return, which is called the IT1 in case of an individual, or IT2, IT2P in case of a partnership for a company and such, every year. That by the end of the 6th month, and that's why you see people queuing around KRA by June the subsequent year. They are doing the return for the annual one, the previous year that has just ended. I hope that's better now.
Very clear. And I can see George wants to chime in on this conversation.
Throw in more?
Yes. Around the issue of global distribution and some of, you've talked about art and curios. When I look at people like musicians who are distributing their music through the platforms we recently saw the government sitting with, those platforms are not based here. And the distribution through those platforms requires to work with aggregators who are also not based here. So I provide music or content of whichever format to a global platform, YouTube, Spotify, iTunes, and those. They pay my aggregator in US dollar in another country, and they tax that money. And then I get my cut, which has been taxed somewhere else in another country, and it comes here. What's the obligation there? Am I paying taxes twice? Both? Do I have my obligation to, in patriotism, to KRA and to the whichever government I've paid? And the reason I'm asking this is in terms of collaboration, because you've spoken a lot about collaboration. Is there an opportunity for the industry to have an ally in KRA to be able to collaborate around how the policies around international platform use versus local platform use, right? So that for anybody who's distributing using a platform that is made in Kenya or based in Kenya and collecting revenue in Kenya and paying tax in Kenya, I'm able to earn X% more. And then if I choose to distribute through global platforms, then this is the tax that's obligated, but where does it sit? So I'm seeing a situation where, because of lack of the ecosystem here, where our creatives are all going to distribute in a place that they have no audience. We're going to Switzerland to distribute to Eldoret, right? But we can directly distribute to Eldoret and work together to make sure that that revenue from Eldoret is paying everybody that we need. So are there opportunities for us as an industry to see KRA as an ally to speak to the government, for example, so that funds that are being collected or distributed through local platforms or local cinemas or local film has an advantage to both the creatives but also the industry?
Maybe this is something that affects all of you. Maybe we want to hear from Lenny and Patel, and then now we have our team respond on this particular issue. Possibly you want to chime in on this particular question? All right.
Yes, I think the revenue stream of and how it's allocated and how it's taxed, especially where the creative content has gone digital, and there are boundaries that are being crossed over. But there is a lot of gray area and different treatment to different types of businesses, which is obviously not healthy for the revenue generation and also the additional taxes that are payable. So, of course, I have seen in the recent time the different divisions and sectors are addressing these issues. However, if you look at, for example, car imports, if you have a local manufacturer versus an imported car, the imported car is going to cost more because the duties have been raised to try and encourage people to buy, locally manufactured cars. Now, with our creative industry, we're not seeing the same level of support. In countries where, and I'll give Nigeria an example because I've worked there and I've worked with the Nigerian films to see how they jump-started that industry. 10 years ago, movies, the creatives had to beg cinemas or TV platforms to run their films. It was that dire, and therefore there was an ecosystem of VCDs, which was big in Nigeria. You make a movie, forget about all the rest, just make VCDs and flash them out in the market. Don't pay taxes, just sell, make the money. The government stepped in. They first went to cinemas and said, we will put a quota of number of local films that must run in cinema. Either that, or you take the initiative and do that. If we come with a quota, it'll be harsh for you. So we suggest that you start taking initiative to run local cinema and give it more preference at better rates, or provide concession. And the government was willing to support such that the taxation rates or pumping more money to market the film so that there is more audience coming in. In the span of that 10 years, let's say 10 to 15 years now, the Nigerian film industry has become so vibrant that international platforms are looking for content to onboard. It's not the other way around. Suddenly, They're running for the content. The cinemas are running for the content. The TV stations, the platforms are looking for content because there's an audience that is willing to consume in all these platforms. So the moral of the story is due to a support, but it was just not one-sided. It was an overall initiative that actually involved every sector. And having done that, it jump-started that the industry. And I believe in Nigeria today, from a GDP perspective, the film industry contributes a massive amount, and therefore now there's more and more support. There's a lot of international attention as well, but the local Nigerians are willing to consume their own content because the quality is just leaps and bounds. It's growing leaps and bounds. That is a struggle we are seeing. Yes, there are some sectors who are trying, but it's not a collective effort. I appreciate, I've heard KRA's comments on the fact that a lot of these are policy issues that cannot be addressed by them. But I believe we're having this forum, and I would really hope that a lot of these comments are taken forward to start addressing them with the relevant government bodies to see how we can start working together. I know the film sector is trying from different ways to lobby about a lot of these policies, but it's still a long way to go because they don't have all the ears yet, and that's what we need. If we start addressing that, I think the goal will be achieved better, and also from the creatives education, which I think I wanted to say earlier, is that they're scared. You know, the word KRA is not something to joke about. If you hear that there's a letter from KRA, you pee in your pants. Let's put it that way. That scenario has to change, but it has to come from KRA being more friendly and engaging. If you want to address school kids, you have to go to their level. Similarly, for the creatives, if you start thinking how they're thinking and to make them feel and understand that, listen, we're not monsters, we would like to educate you. And after educating, we would like to hold your hand to go through the process. After all that, if something goes wrong, we're still here. We'd like to help you. What we want is compliance. Like you said, in the introduction, it's easier for those who are compliant to try and manage them than to chase those who are non-compliant. Yes? But the systems are such, in the creative industry, you have these, like the video libraries, who are the large culprits of non-taxable revenues. They don't have the resource or know-how. I mean, they're doing a buy and sell. It's like a kiosk business. How do you bring in your PAYE and VAT and withholding tax, etc., in that process, which they're not going to understand? That is the industry you're tackling, the 98% here. Yes, so it requires a lot of thought in how you can approach, and maybe, like you said, a one tax, a simple tax procedure might be the way. I find in my business, there's a lot of time consumption on tax, a lot of time consumption. Where our business is actually the film distribution, it's creative, it's entertainment, but we spend a lot of time on clerical work, which is not effective, but I would like to have a marketing and salesperson over an accountant who just does tax issues, but I can't afford currently. So it's one of those two, and I would prefer to be compliant than to have KRA harass me over it. So you see, these are obvious challenges creatives face. We are a business, so we are managing best of both worlds, but the individuals, like you said, you have a doctor, you have a personal physician, you have a personal lawyer. Again, does a layman actually do that? No. A layman goes to a clinic where they don't have personalized relationship with the doctor. When there's a legal issue, they start asking friends for advice. There's not really a legal process. Everything costs money, right? So it's got to be thought in that direction. They are not a professional business protocol system that they follow, or are guided by auditors, are guided by tax consultants to be able to comply as needed.
Okal and then Mumu.
Can I just add something on the education side?
Sure.
I think for KRA as well, there's been a lot of mention of education and a switch in approach. The people who can help KRA achieve that are these people, right? The people who are professionals are Sarah Sen and the filmmakers. These are the guys who can make in 5-10 years look like a good big brother rather than right? In terms of that collaboration around how do we change the attitude, I think if we were looking for an easy industry to collaborate with, it would be this. It's how do we sit with the creatives, and because we do see your ads around May, June, when you need people to comply, we know there's a lot of money being spent. If that money was coming back to this sector as an exchange of value, where we're saying as KRA, we constantly, every May to June, we're spending XB to make sure that Kenyans are compliant. But if we broke it down into a continuous 5-year, 10-year plan, where we are communicating the revenue collector as a supporter of how the country is growing. The people who can tell that story, whether true or fictional, are these people here. So how does KRA look at them as that, right? How do we start to sit together and say, within the next 10 years, we need to shift our revenue contribution from X to X. We need from Y to Z. And the people who can help that attitude change are this creative sector. So our music needs to sound supportive of KRA. Our films need to sound supportive. But that's a change that we need to do intentionally rather than hope it happens naturally, right? That's all.
I'll be taking you up on that immediately for this conversation. But however, to address the concerns you've raised, Mokali, you could start us off and then hand over to Mumo.
Thank you, Mushiri. I will address the first issue which George explained, that if you put your music in a foreign platform, you are taxed, and again you are taxed in Kenya. I think that one can be treated through what is called, that one touches on the double tax agreement. If you put your music in a platform which in a country which doesn't have treaties with Kenya, then I think that one you will be taxed twice. But if it's a country which Kenya has treaty with, then you will just be taxed once. So that one touches more on the double tax agreement. I think we have about 15 to 16 countries Kenya has an agreement with, so that we avoid the issue of double tax agreement. Now, on the issue of KRA being afraid of the authority or being harsh, I think the KRA has gone through a lot of change, and even one of the manifestos of this government is engage and engage and engage. So even right now, if you realize, most of our demand letters have reduced drastically, because before even you send that demand, you engage taxpayer through phone call, email. By the time you send a demand, in fact, I have not seen demand from this year. Very rare. So I think Gideon can also chime on it.
Thank you, Carl. And thank you for the elaborate, picture given, especially on that area of aggregation. That's what I caught there. And Okal is the one who is based in that sector, which is called digital. And for sure, KRA is doing as much as it can for now to open up that space for the purposes of catching up with the revenues and the tax framework that can be put into place to take care of that growing industry. So one thing, as Okal has put it, is that we are very mindful, being regulated, of course, through our laws that we don't make, they are made at Parliament, in advocating for people to actually transact within areas that we have DTAs. DTA are double taxation agreements. A country like South Africa, we have a DTA, where, for example, if then you are taxed in South Africa, you don't need to be taxed again in Kenya. You just need that evidence that you actually pay taxes there And then here, you just do a reporting, then you are able to get that as good as that refund that Bwana CEO was talking about. Other countries like Germany, the UK, India, depending on whichever areas. So there's a lot under the Ministry of Foreign Affairs that we normally share, because those are results of the diplomatic protocol that is actually reserved to the executive. Our work is actually to implement. But once you have that information, then it is good to capitalize on that. I had also someone ask about why do maybe some film industry people prefer doing it in South Africa and not in Kenya. There are a lot of things that goes into this. A country would actually determine what they would want to promote. And our country, we may have things like foreign exchange, we may have things like tourism, we may have things like the film industry and such. So when you look at the aspect of South Africa, they will want to combine and then see which one do they give incentives on so that it can boost the other one. Same thing that we need to apply into our economy. That if we want to bring in tourism, we want to bring in film creation and content, and I like what Madam said there about Nigeria, the approach to promoting local. Then just increase the duty and the taxes on whatever it is that is non-local, and the media houses will come back to local. Just give them a time frame that do this by this time. If you don't, then we will take action. And all this is actually a preserve of our legislature. Our legislature is a very important house. The National Assembly, the Senate, they can today change anything that within the next 30 days, you need to follow up with our executive. The CS that is actually responsible for matters of film and such. Once you agree on certain parameters, they just need to table, and once it becomes a policy, then it will create some conduciveness that will actually promote this industry. Then to the other aspect of KRA, has an aspect of sending that information to everyone, that we are no longer an authority. We want to profess the aspect of service delivery. And by doing so, then we have come up with various departments. We even have a fully pledged marketing department that actually does all those surveys and research so that they can bring feedback as to what people would actually want to hear, what modalities or platforms they would want them to be addressed for the purposes of us spreading that information. And a beautiful one that George showed there in terms of why then doesn't KRA engage the creative industry that we have so that they can be the ambassadors to actually deliver this message home? A very good suggestion that I think our boss there, Gitegi, and yes, our top leadership are able to take it up for the purposes of collaborating. Because as you have said, there is an aspect of, give and take, an aspect of to actually understand that regardless of the informal nature, that the 98%, if I know that it's gonna be wrong, then there are avenues on how it can be corrected. Actually answer a call on things like pay, withholding, refunds and such, then KRA is just, within reach so that they can advise me without having, that aspect of fearing and thinking that, hey, can I trickle something that will bring me problems even into the future on something? To put more efforts into doing that sort of partnership and advertisements that you have been running of late, even including the local creatives in terms of run some messages for us, and by doing so with that service, so that as we consume it, as we go for it, we enable everyone just to up that for sure this is ours and not theirs. Thank you.
Fantastic. For a series of questions, and then we retire the panel. So Lenny, please go.
Yeah, thank you, Karanu. I just wanted to ask for clarification on a new tax that was introduced in this new Finance Act, which is the Marketing Services Tax. How does that sit where, let's say, I'm providing marketing services as a professional, they still have professional services 5% withholding tax, then there's a marketing services tax. How does it sit? how is it going to be applied? And who does it apply to?
Through the Finance Act 2023? The one for withholding is what?
Marketing services tax that was brought in.
Not the withholding one that has been given to the marketing. You know, if you are doing advertisements, if you're actually doing such a service, then when you're paying for it, they do the withholding. Is it that one or which?
That one?
Yes.
But if I'm doing my, let's say I'm providing a service
Yes.
to a client of mine.
Yes.
As a professional service, and I'm giving them consultancy on marketing.
Yes.
There's still that 5% which is on professional services which applies, right?
Sure.
Then there's still that marketing services tax again.
When I see you got your question. Now, you see, we're looking at these two aspects of, are you trying to do an advertising service or a consultancy within advertising? I'll differentiate it in this way. I may be a consultant who deals with trying to advise agencies that actually undertake the advertising service. Meaning, I may be consulting for them on aspects that are around their business and not necessarily having to execute that service. Then when now I'm doing one-on-one with an advertising agency or doing a business for another person, then again, that's where the advertising withholding will come in. You know, the way when you call it marketing service, I was wondering which one is that. It is only bringing in that advertising venture that or a middle task that you carry with yourself on behalf of another person. Then it will bring in a withholding aspect where there is now a principal and an agency for the purposes of doing the withholding. But if you're a consultant, then that consultancy is now on the broader nature of any other thing that you may also be doing for them. Is that?
Well, I think there's a lot of confusion around it, and I think there needs to be clarity issued coming from the KRA to the industry, and then what constitutes this, what is eligible for this, and what is not.
Good. Then I think the best thing through a moderator, what we will do, we'll gather that and even pieces of those other queries that we have been able to bring up, and then do a specific set for the creatives. We know what outrightly, even if someone is actually not here, they can be able to get this information. And even as when this session is done, then we can have an array of those questions and even their direct responses, such that you can even download and even refer to them for the purposes of bringing that clarity. I think that would help. All right, thanks, sir.
And even more on that, Lenny, maybe what I think maybe your question was looking for is sales promotion, marketing, and advertising, that particular introduction of the 5%. This was following the introduction of the same on non-residents in 2020 at 20%. So now the Act was clarifying that in 2023, it has been expanded to resident persons at 5%. So it's just an expansion of the withholding regime. So it's not a confusion, it's more of a clarification.
There is confusion, because even before, this came in 2023, on what I would charge my clients as my fees for consult, I'll still being paid, I'll still getting 5% withheld. And that's what I was talking about, the refunds issue that comes about. But on this one now, what is happening, some clients are actually withholding on the gross amount. And some of that money is me, maybe it's come through me, but I'm going to Nation Media Group, Standard Group, and they're withholding 5% on that. So it's causing a lot of confusion in the industry right now.
We'll do some more efforts in terms of trying to demystify on how it is actually also applicable for the purposes of knowing the classification of which activity, which service. And as Karanu has put it, for the purposes of promotions, for the purposes of the actual consultancy then that is now attached to those sort of promotions and the agency activity that someone does, then we can be able to segment that, and the people who are involved in the same can be able now to know which one am I doing at whichever point. Thank you.
All right. At this point, I'd like to open up questions from the floor. I would guide that you ask a specific panelist a question. We'll take all the questions all at once, And then now after that, you'll allow me to retire my panel. But are there any questions from the floor? All right, Kimani.
Thank you so much. Some good info, heavy information in one sitting from 3 different departments. That's heavy info. I think it's a good start. It's a good start. My observation, I don't know everybody, because here we all represent different aspects of the creative economy, is that my observation is that we don't understand each other. That is why these questions are coming up. We don't understand tax, and you get to see 100,000 that comes in, but what is my process? By the time I'm making that 100,000, how much have I actually spent? Because you're seeing the 100,000, but if you understand, and then when you see this 100,000, then you'll understand it. So when they mention that they fear, the fear is because there is lack of understanding. There's a very big gap of your different departments understanding. Why do we need these cameras coming into this country? Why do we need these foreigners coming into this country? Why did Lupita go to move in Uganda instead of doing it here, back at home? They landed in Uganda, they were on set for 14 days, they spent $10 million. But KRA is more concerned about this camera that comes in. It should not stay, you know? But look at what that movie will, when it comes in, what does it do? When it comes in, music is engaged, agencies are engaged, equipment is engaged. That $10 million in 14 days. There's no other industry in the economy that can do that in 14 days. The example of South Africa, the reason why they go to South Africa, yeah, is very simple. It's so simple. In Kenya, the incentives for film are a rumor. We hear their incentives. Then you tell me, I go find the CS to approve. That is how we lost a movie, the one for Isili. It went to South Africa. They acted Nairobi in South Africa. Reason why? Guys camped. They camped at Treasury. They went and camped at CS. The guys, these are investors. These are investors. That's not how to handle investors. That was $30 million that just landed that we lost of a simple thing. Simple Google. Simple Google. Anyone can find this. In South Africa, they make it is open and everybody knows. I'll send you the whole document. For movies, for South Africa, the incentives. Tax deduction of 20% on expenditure for foreign productions with potential for higher breaks if post-production takes place in South Africa. For some countries, they put a cap that they must spend like closer home. Okay, let me just pick one. Australia, co-productions. If they come and co-produce with guys here, meaning they'll spend more here, tax rebate of up to 40%. UAE, Abu Dhabi, 30%. Minimum spend, 5 million cap. So here it's, what's the perspective? Do we want these investors to come in, or we don't want this money coming in? The country has a dollar crunch, yeah? How many movies do we need to sort that out? 2, 3? And we are sorted. So I think this is a very good beginning. It is a very good beginning, but we need more and more focused, very specific, so that if we have one sitting, we are talking incentives, we sit back and look at these incentives fully. We have your big taxpayers. They get tax rebates for CA, they call what? When they give charity and when they do all those nice things. What if you are to convert that and tell them, guys, if you spend within the creative sector, this is the tax rebate you'll get. Because now what do? They go give unga apa, rice pale, they buy some mutumbas in a nini, go give children, and then obviously they say they spent more and then they get it. It is nice to help those kids, but it's a poverty issue. Creative sector is the one sector that can employ every other sector. So if they actually got their tax rebates and whatever it is that they get because of spending within the creative sector, you will actually end up collecting much more than you will now trying to find out who we are. Because now we produce movies in our homes. The set is my house, 2-3 cameras, we produce a movie. You will never know. You will see the movie. So the cat and mouse will never work. It is how do you open doors. The more you open these doors, because this does not need major changes of constitution and going to parliament, it's how do you spur the industry so that these musicians, as you said, that national anthem, sung by Kenyans, played on radio every morning at 6:30. Where I grew up at 6:22, there used to be a song. So many vijana, muongeze pia bidii. Every day KBC, 6:22 a.m. in the morning. That was the one that used to tell me leave the house and go to school. You know? So the opportunities, as somo wangu hapa George said, engage the creative sector, involve them in what you're doing. You have a annual budget of about 200 million of advertising as KRA. This gap that we are talking about, that we are not understanding each other, they are the guys. Music every day, plays in the theater, TV shows, where KRA just in every TV show there's a KRA person somewhere walking in and telling us something. You know, simple things, but we have to work together. But thank you so much, because I believe this is just the first small step in better, more fruitful engagements. Thank you.
I think humanity deserves a round of applause for those wonderful sentiments that we just heard. And I can assure you that what you have just spoken, we have leadership watching this particular live broadcast, and we're taking note. Over and above it, we do intend to have more engagement with the creative sector and see how we can bridge the gap between where we are and where we need to be. And I'm sure Momo will respond to some of those comments. If there's any other question that we need to respond to, I see there's a gentleman there.
Thank you. How are you, everyone? I'm Joseph from Heva Fund. We are not really actively involved in creating of content. We are involved in financing and consultancy. So recently we got an email from KRA telling us that we need to register for excess duty, which we are not aware of. So actually what we do is we deal with financing, like creative industry. We give loans, we earn an interest on it. Then we have not been paying for excess duty. We have not registered, but we have been told to register for the same. On the same email, they also told us to do like installments tax. And we always wanted clarity on that issue because also we had made like a loss in the previous period. So we don't know how do we make like installment taxes or been making losses in the previous periods. So kindly elaborate on that. And maybe you can also give us maybe what other taxes or what are the requirements by the law for us to apply, maybe the obligation that we need to apply for. Thank you.
Thank you for that question, and we're happy to hear that you're willing to comply. I'm sure, Momo, you'll take that up on issues of excise on financial services. Any other question before I go down? Okay.
Hello again, everyone. My question is to you, Momo. It's on withholding tax. Like my boss over there said, agency in other industries has been understood by KRA, but we don't feel understood. You bill a client like KRA for marketing services or production services. You bill 100, let's say $1 million bob. 10% of that is our money. But when KRA is paying me, they withhold on the entire 1 million. That is 50K gone. Out of these 100, I still need to pay my back office. I still need to pay my employees. I end up making, if I didn't have any costs on that 100K, I would pay 30K as income tax. But you've already taken 50. You've left me with about 20 to work with. Cash flow issues are not a joke. They are killing businesses. If I tell my client, then I'm going to invoice you 800K as third-party costs, and the other 100K I'm going to indicate as my margin. Then the client says, KRA will come after me and say withhold on the entire thing. What is the actual position of KRA on this application? Because how does KRA get to know that I need to only be withheld on my management fees and not on everything? We used to work, a while ago we used to do an invoice. You would do an invoice and attach your third party pro forma invoices to show the client that, 90% of this money is not mine. So just withhold on the 10%. But now I think they've been shaken down so much. They are not listening. They are saying, you bill me 100 million, 5 million goes immediately as withholding. You said 11 months is not is enough time for somebody to follow up, but 11 months in terms of cash flow can kill a business. My second question is on the paying withholding after every 5 days of making payments. Small organizations, which is where a lot of Kenyans are playing at, will make payments throughout the month on different days, unlike big corporations where you have systems where people are making payments maybe bi-weekly or once a month. So you are telling this person who doesn't have a 24-hour sitting in accountant, telling them every 5 days for the payment you wrote a check for, you need to remit that withholding. That means that this person in this creative has to maintain a full-time accountant, which sometimes the 10% again cannot pay a full-time accountant and pay all the other resources needed. You sit back as a creative and you wonder, when this policy is being made, in whose interest is it? Is it that the government just wants money quickly at the expense of who gets to pay tax tomorrow? So as you are taking those messages forward, equipment, this goes to the brothers, gentlemen. In the process of bringing in equipment, you need to go to association, then go to the CS. Wants to import one equipment, the small guy who is starting up, the small guy who could the guy who is actually creating a product, but they have to start from the bottom. Does that guy understand that process, and is that process friendly to them? Is it close to them? Part of a good taxation system is simplicity and equity. Do we feel like it's simple to us, not to you guys, because you guys are enforced. That is your specialization. But what about the guy who is actually creating revenue? Is this process simple to them? Thank you.
Want to lock in you are out. All right, we have a question up there.
I'm not sure whether more of my name is Evans Ogeto. I represent the Photographers Association of Kenya. I'm the current chairperson, and mine is more of a follow-up to this meeting and to present our wish list. So every day in our community group, there's always a question of how to run business, how to deal with small tax issues, and most of our members who are big fall under the turnover tax. Our members are not those big taxpayers. They combine their PINs with their businesses, but they are able to employ a few people. And we also have community members who are students, people with the current proposition from the governor. You see a big crop of photographers who are coming up in the city. So we would want them to also understand the tax implications on how to do their businesses. So my request is, how can we create a meeting or a setup where I can talk to our members and I can request that they're present, so that the relevant departments, whether it's digital tax, turnover tax, partnerships, can talk to them and tell them what it is that they need to do to be sitting well with KRA.
Thank you for that. Actually, that one I can respond to very quickly. We have our taxpayer education lead, Ms. Martha Ngoko, and I'm sure after this particular engagement, we shall sit with you and we get in touch with your members and we have a sensitization forum for your particular members. We do have a taxpayer education wing within KRA, and we take the business of sensitizing taxpayers on matters compliance very seriously. So if there's a gap, we are here to meet that need. Before I take it to the panel, is there any other question? I see. We start with here at the back.
Yeah, thank you. Matters pertaining to music. My name. I'd like to ask, is there a way KRA can help us actually to scrap those taxes at the point of entry? So is there, my question is, can KRA be our allies in lobbying for such exemptions? Remember, these are vocational skills that need to be nurtured, where if you want to learn to play a guitar, you need to own one. Because ukipewa homework ukacheza guitar na huna yako, it's going to be a bit difficult. So in the spirit of supporting the creative economy and people who are beginning from down there, how can we explore this together with KRA? Asante.
Thank you. I'm sure Safari will take note of that question. Let me take the last question, then head back to the panel.
Hi. This is a question regarding the digital tax. Just looking for some clarity. Now, government recognizes crypto, but does not recognize it as legal tender or an asset. Is there some sort of conflict there that we're taxing that?
All right, let me start with Safari to respond to the trade facilitation question. Or Carl, you shall follow with the crypto issue. And of course, Momo to respond to the last set of questions.
Thank you, Karano. Yes, the two questions back. The issue of the importation. We usually provide proposals to and exemption. We usually provide our input to the proposals for amendment of taxes, and it goes all through policy and to treasury level where it is discussed. Of course, and what I would advise is that also from different angles for it to be very strong. Of course, we'll be give you the proposal as it is, and give you our reasons why we think it should be amended or they should be considered for exemption. But again, when it goes to the physical level of analysis at Treasury, it needs also to have that backing from the Kenya Film Association to support the reason why, for sure, we need these incentives for the film industry. I think that would be my submission on the issue of the exemptions.
Thank you. On the issue of taxation of the cryptocurrency, even though the government doesn't recognize as a legal tender, I think there's a proposal we wrote to engage the CBK on the issue of the legal tender, but it's still a work in progress. It's still not yet materialized. So the CBK is also giving us a cold feet because of the volatility of the cryptocurrency sector or economy. But there's a request where there's an engagement with the CBK on that. And also the CBK also told us that now when you're paying the 3%, they assume that you already converted to equivalent Kenyan shilling. So that one is still a gray area, but CBK needs to give us guidance on that.
Let me start from the very nice queries brought by Bwana Kimani. Hope I got the name right. Yes. Now, about understanding the gap. It is not an easy thing, and I want to agree with you. But then, if KRA was today to understand all the provide, then it will be a tall order. Something that I'm not saying is not doable. It can be done. But then who is this intermediary who can enable us to understand a certain industry, like creatives industry, for example? It is the stakeholders that are within that industry. And one, we start with the regulatory perspective, like the Kenya film industry, the people who are players within the same. And then within the auspices of the ministry that actually does or deals with filming matters, they can outrightly say, yes, that lady there is a photographer and she's registered with us. But if Karanu comes today to KRA and says, I want to import a guitar because I'm a musician, KRA cannot know, is it? It is not possible. So it is only by the virtue of the ability of the stakeholders within the same that they can be able to identify their people. Then now, those stakeholders, when we work together, they can now be able to validate and even verify that for sure, yes, we want to bring this because of our people, and our people are 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. So I would highly recommend that within the bodies that are within your formations, then you approach through the ministry. The ministry is actually very close to the National Assembly than us in terms of asking for those specific, very key aspects of creative industry, because KRA may not understand them in a better way than the ministry, because the ministry has technocrats or rather experts that actually deal with these things daily. When you want to organize an exhibition or those sort of movies that Kimani was talking about, I actually didn't know that one movie would bring like $10 million in this country. with this economy where we are having some dollar crunch, then I wish I would have been able to have the ability. I would have just said, let's have like 4 by the end of the year, then the dollar goes back to 100. Because if they're coming to spend that money here and they bring those greenbacks, then they sort our problems. But now looking at it, if the experts within that industry are the ones now advocating for this, and even now inviting KRA to help come up with regulations that 1, 2, 3. Even as you make laws to tax this, please consider X, Y, Z. Then I think stop being rumors if we actually work together. And also, the tax methodologies or other approaches will also stop being, you only, within $1 million, yours is only 100,000. Then we work towards ways of looking at that 100,000 and not that 1 million. Because you're just a conduit where someone else made the 900,000 through you. Is it? Rebate suggestion. Now, the CS, who is responsible for the matters involving filming and all that, can table a motion, a specific arm of the creative evidence, then definitely money will flow towards that side. Combination for the purposes of asking where can we get these laws, how can we formulate them, through who, and they become a reality to work towards the same. Then Joseph had a concern, Joseph from Hela Fund, I hope I got that right, financing the creatives, and you dish out loans and you earn some interest, and you also have a question about installment taxes. Let me address that. One, dealing with loans is a preserve of an it's a matter of giving it out and coming back. When it comes to the aspect of loaning, now your income. Within the same area, we have another tax that comes in that is regulated by Excise Duty Act 2015, issuing out the loans. You see the big boys in terms of they are now in that category. So that aspect of loaning, regardless of it out to, as long as you're now using the money to actually charge interest and be able to get back your money with some revenue streams on your end. Deals with services, and those gains that they will attract excise duty. Example, like when Safaricom or M-Pesa, they are doing the money trace duty. So that is what KRA is telling you, you should be able to partake. You are an institution in that line, please get, or the station, let them help you understand the environment that you work in and the tax prerequisites, because requirement by that law. In case there's a problem, you can always get back to us and we'll be able to give clear guidelines on what needs to be done. But I believe your TSO can handle that. The rates started at around 10% back in 2014, fees charged on financial transactions. And they could run across banks, SACCOs, housing trust, and name them, the ones that actually do that aspect of loaning, giving out money. Even forex bureaus, they fall under the same categories. They shot up to around in the year 2020, 2021, up to a rate of 20%. From the Finance Act 2023, the rate is now 15%. So it will be a 15% charge, which is excise duty charge on those fees on the transactions. Installment taxes. When you are required to declare your taxes at the end of every year, then the government, KRA being the government's agency, does not have to wait for you to close the year so that you close your books, go and find out whether you have made a profit or a loss, so that now you can bring the tax to them. The regime provides that you are supposed to pay those taxes in small bits, so that you also don't feel that huge pinch when they want it at once. And every 20th of the 4th month, the 6th month, the 9th month, and the 12th month. So those are four installments. You are required to actually remit your taxes through installments. So that is a mode of payment which we call installment taxes. In the event that you had a loss in the previous year, then you have a reason as not to pay the installments because the last year you had a loss which you are looking forward to extinguish so that you can come back to profit ways. And you just need to exemplify that to KRA so that they don't ask for the installments taxes from you. Because once you make a loss, you're expected first of all to offset that loss within your next trading period. And once you have exhausted it, then now you can get into the tax payment position. If you are on profit, then you're supposed to take your taxes that you paid last year. Let's say you paid 500,000 worth of taxes for income tax. Then you up them by 10%. So you'll multiply 500 by 110%. That takes you to 550. So 550 is the amount of tax that you expected now to actually pay to KRA. So you don't have to wait for December or June or April the subsequent year to actually pay that amount. Divide it by 4, then pay by April, by June, by September, and by December in equal installments. And in the event that you overpay or these installments are so much compared to the tax that when you do your books after the end of the year, you find that my tax was only 300,000, yet I paid 550. We come back to what is now active, which is called the installment adjustment voucher. And you'll be given an opportunity to still utilize your money that you actually paid during the year. And you are not able to utilize the entire tax. Withholding tax, I think there's a brother up there, I didn't get your name, sorry. But you asked about the cash flows. I clearly hear you. And I'll just refer you to section 13 of VAT. That section actually says if you are dealing strictly with reimbursements or money that is actually at an agency level, then that is clearly not your revenue. It is actually a pure reimbursement that you're actually undertaking or rather dealing with on behalf of your principal. I'll pick an example. You are an importing agency. I'll give you the one for importation so that you can relate it to what it is that you do when you're doing the agency for advertising. Then you want to bring a container of electronics, for example, on my behalf. The container requires 1 million or 1.5 to actually clear customs duties at the port. It belongs to me. I bought it from whichever country. I send you as my agent. You do not have to pay those taxes as if they are yours. You are paying them on my behalf. And you get a commission of either 5% or 10%. So in your books, you cannot indicate my revenue because I reimburse you the entire amount that you spend on my behalf. What does section 13 say? In the event that it's a pure reimbursement because of an agency principal relation, then the invoices are two different. There's one invoice that I'm reimbursing you your money, and there's an invoice from you that you are actually charging me the services that you provided to me, is it? So the second invoice will be chargeable. The first invoice is a reimbursement, won't be chargeable. And that would be my advice. As long as that law is strictly adhered to, even when you're issuing an ETIMS receipt, then that is the modality. Withholding tax within collection of 5 working days. I hear you. These are considerations that have been made because perhaps we have been having problems where institutions deduct from where we started and they give you the portion that belongs to you, but they don't remit this to KRA. So you stay a whole year without getting your certificate. So this is an enhancement to try and push them that within 5 days, they are actually supposed to remit. And if they don't remit, by the way, from our end, we normally penalize them. We have a section called 39A under the TPA, Tax Procedures Act. It says if they don't remit on time, if they collect that money and they don't take it to KRA, then we will charge them penalties. So that from our end, we are implementing. And what I said from the beginning is that if there is a way that after some time we can have it legislated also such that as a beneficiary of that certificate and you have not received it, you can actually front the authority, because George is my trading partner and he has given me my 95 and my 5% certificate, I'm not seeing it. Please, can you inquire this from George? You will even have informed us that George actually deducted and he never remitted. So we will actually deal with it from the back end on the same. But now this boils down to the partnership that we can have in terms of enhancing these certificates to keep flowing. For the 5 days, as opposed to the 20th day of the subsequent month, I believe it's sort of going to hasten the money going to KRA for the purposes of every beneficiary getting their certificate. So since it is something that we have started from the onset of the Finance Act 2023, let's give it time. Let's try and observe whether that can help sort that problem of people not being given their certificates. But of course, at a small pinch in terms of affecting maybe the cash flows or even the requirement to keep the records, which we said it may be something of a partnering approach, whereby you may be called in just to play your duty, to play your role. But with time, we can try and see how it can be done in a better way, not to strain every other person's resource. Whenever you have the knowledge, then it is possible. We are also doing a lot of gearing towards the aspect of digitizing, so that simplifying the processes, when it is just a matter of a click of a button, then it can be easier for every other taxpayer and enjoyable to actually also participate in doing that. So we're also looking forward towards that, even simplifying more in terms of the process of generating the certificates and such, so that everyone can feel accommodated. Because the technological appeal that everyone has, and also with time, we have seen technology has actually grown. And the way technology keeps on changing and everyone getting onboarded for the purposes of wanting not to be left, then we would also want to, utilize that same space so that people's obligations can also be taken up the same way. And at some point, we may actually be able to evaluate and see that this is being done seamlessly by the people who are within such a certain industry. Then allow me to comment on the last one now. Safari will comment. I think Safari has mentioned on the importation of machine. And that one I wanted to give a very practical example. We have seen the Safari rally that just came back to our country in the recent past. When they bring those machines from out there, they don't pay for duty because they are coming for some period, then they go back. They only place a bond, a security. And that is the only thing that we hang on to. The vehicle goes, does their then the World Rally competition is done, then they take back the machine to the country where it came from. So that can also happen when you want to bring in some machine so that you use it in Kenya and then take it back. It's only the process. And why are we saying the Kenya Film Board and also the CS? Again, because KRA doesn't know who actually belongs to which industry. My brother there talked about photography. KRA may not be having an idea of how a photographer looks like when they appear before a tax officer. But the Kenya Filming Board or the commission or even the people within the ministry may be able to know, because there is a way that they regularize that. Again, when incentives are given, there is a tendency for people to misuse them. And they do so where there is gap of that information. So to cushion that, that is why the Act would actually say, through the recommendation of the CS that is responsible for that. So that not just every Tom, Dick, and Harry wakes up and comes to benefit from the same when that exemption was not created actually for them. So the system just tries to cushion itself from abuse of people who would want to utilize that opportunity. Evans talked about having an opportunity to do the education forum. We are gladly available. Kindly get in touch with us. We'll organize. We have a full department, a full unit that deals with that, and they can even come to wherever you want, where in terms of hosting them, in terms of having your members and getting more queries that you may want answered from our end. Kindly get in touch. we are ready to do that. And the last one, that would be on fees on transactions, no, exemptions of equipment. And I think I've mentioned on that, with that example of Safari Rally. It is practical, it happens. So long as this person is a non-person registered who does this, then they can be given. Thank you so much.
Great comments. Before I retire my panel, I shall allow you 30 seconds each to give your closing remarks, and then we go on to the last segment of our schedule today. So allow me to start with Ms. Trishna Patel. Please, if you could just give us your closing remarks.
Thank you for this panel today. I think it's a good start to the direction we're all trying to flow. There are a lot of challenges, yes, but I do also appreciate, and I'd like to commend that we have seen the changes. I personally see a little more sanitization about the different taxes. KRA is more open to dialogue, and so we are on the right path. I do appreciate that the different, the film sector will have to engage more. I would like to urge that you're able to pass a message on that from KRA's perspective. You're open to that dialogue and looking to change. There was an aspect of DTA that was mentioned earlier. There are some important countries that we do a lot of trade with, and now with these this content going global, I think more DTAs are also important for the growth of the industry locally. Like the US, the Netherlands, we don't have DTAs with them, and they are an important country, and we do a lot of trade with them. So I think it's important to look into that. But overall, I think a lot has been covered today, and I'm hoping that such conversations will continue, that there is a follow-through, and we're able to get a lot of these changes that are being talked about. Thank you.
I think for me, it's been great to hear about the engage, learn, collaborate process. It would be good to see that in practice. I think strategically, for the revenue collector, the creative sector offers you a long-term vision. So I don't know if tax collection is looked at as a short, medium, and long-term. I know you always want by June. But if we looked at a long-term, 10 years, 15 years, 20 years, where do we want to go as a country? What do we want to be able to do with our taxes? The creative economy will become a major player in that. And so starting the conversation now, I think, is important. There's a lot of learning that needs to happen. And I'm curious about, during engagement and learning, what happens to enforcement, right? So it shouldn't be enforce, then engage and learn. While we're engaging and learning towards going to being able to enforce effectively, how can we participate? I think the people in the room is testament of our willingness to comply. We want to be able to contribute, but also you're dealing with people who are going to ask questions. So they're going to want to know that the tax I'm paying is going to help X, Y, and Z, especially direct impact. And so strategically, I think this is a very important engagement. I think this is something to open up. And as Kimani said, we need to be able to drill it down into some very specific areas. And so a lot more engagements, but we'd like to offer support kwa kusafisha the KRA name, especially in the public, just so that we can move more into compliance than having to fight around something that's important for us as a people. And so we thank you guys for the opportunity and for the convening of this session, and we look forward to more engagement and actual collaboration.
George, over to you, Safari.
Thank you. Thank you to the organizers of this event, and thank you for your interest in the same as well. Let's continue engaging to understand one another, as Mr. Kimani said. through understanding one another, it's where we'll build this economy. Remember, we are building this country together. Be in the different sectors we are in, we are building the economy. So let's continue engaging, and also through the association, the umbrella. Let's front our issues and let's know where to handle, as my colleague said, yeah? Because some of these things may not be KRA. KRA can only do its part, but there's that person like the CS, that Minister of yours, can engage the counterpart CS towards, like, if the amendments of the law to suit the film industry. So let's continue engaging, and thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I think it has been a good engagement from this forum. And I've also learned that South Africa has good tax incentives more than us. Us is hot air. So we are going to take the concerns to the policymakers, because we have policymakers who are ahead of us or above us. So we are going to take some of those policies so that in the next financial budget, they might be brought to consideration. And also the way I said, when you are called for public participation, some of these issues, me as a KRA officer, I can't really involve directly, because my work is to enforce. But when you are present there, your views may be taken seriously. Thank you.
Ningependa kuwashukuru sana kwa kuona ni vyema kupata nafasi kujadiliana pamoja. Ni furaha yetu kupeana ujumbe ambao unastahili kuhamasisha kila mmoja wetu kuhusu haya mambo ya ushuru. Hili taifa tulijenge kwa pamoja, ndiposa tunapofurahia matunda ya kukua wa Kenya, kila mmoja ametekeleza wajibu wake. To finish it up, there is an amnesty program that is going on. If you happen to have debts that are from December 2022, yani kama unadaiwa kwa madeni mpaka December 2022, kurudi nyuma, there is an amnesty program that has started from 1st of September this year as a product of Finance Act 2023. You can utilize it, you pay your principal tax, then the penalties and the interest will be fully waived. Utasamehewa the penalties and the interest as long as you pay your principal taxes. For those perhaps who have been in business for quite some time, or you registered, you've never filed, and you have pending penalties and all that, just follow that with your TSOs, and I'm so sure it is meant to benefit all of us as long as we sort out the principal tax. Then penalties and interest, which are defined to be also taxes, now will be waived away. And this ends in June 2024. So check your books, look into your tax obligations and any tax balances, and plan on how to benefit from this. Kutoka kwangu nashukuru sana, nawatakia kila laheri. Asante.
Thank you, Mumo. Let me now ask my panelists to take back their seats. Thank you, George. Thank you, Trishna. Thank you, Isaac, James, and Safari. Ladies and gentlemen, if you could just appreciate them with a hand clap. I really enjoyed the panel discussions that we had. We had great things that we went through. And even as they take their seats, I'd like to recognize and appreciate our online audience. I can see comments from Immaculate Juma, Influx Africa, Nixon Omondi, Kirthi Ernest, The Banter, Lydia Chepkoche, and others. Ladies and gentlemen, I don't want to take too much of your time. So as we are coming to a close, let me invite back your industry representative, Chairman Roy, to give us his concluding remarks and resolutions and way forward. So Roy, you could take to the podium.
Thank you. Wow, that was intense. I feel like I've been in class for a long time. It was beautiful to find that there's some issues that can be addressed and others that we did not know about. And that was the purpose of this meeting with KRA, because when Ataturk approached Kenya Revenue Authority and we said, what are the obligations in that particular tax section, what obligations do we owe in terms of taxation? The first thing was to have dialogue, all right? There's been an initiative to how do we build the creative sector to be a job creator, an income generator, and also provide revenue to the exchequer. And the collector of that revenue is actually the Kenya Revenue Authority. And so we thought as a stakeholder, we need to speak to the tax person to find out, one, what are the obligations that we have? How do we understand, how do we navigate through this journey of becoming compliant taxpayers from the creative sector? Much has been said, but there's a lot of work that's going on in the background as we speak. Number one, in terms of the challenges that are there, which have been informed by a research report that was done and sponsored by FSD, Kenya Bankers, the government of Kenya, and Ataturk, where they said informality was one of the biggest challenges in the creative sector, a lack of capital or access to that particular capital. And so what we did was basically the government then created a task force for the creative economy, where they said there are three things that you need to do. Number one is to revitalize the creative sector post-COVID, look at the recommendations of the report and implement those. Number two, it said coordinate the different stakeholders in the creative sector, where we have the government, the private sector, the development partners and the creatives themselves. And third, develop a tool that is able to measure the contribution of the creative economy to the national to national development. And so while the work of that task force was not completed, there are things like this that are happening right now that that we are still doing in terms of trying to find out what would our contribution be. And so moving forward, this is not going to be a talk shop, all right? We're just going to talk and leave and then talk again and leave. The question is, what are the next practical steps that ought to be taken? And number one, we need to start looking at activities that will now bring relevant things. Lenny, who's not here with us right now, mentioned that there's a lot of money that is still held in terms of payments to reimbursements to the for withholding tax to the advertising agencies, and we will be working to release close to £500 million shillings to the industry as investment to activities that are going to come up. Because if advertising agencies then come up, it has a ripple effect in facilitating employment for actors, for musicians, and basically people who are in the creative space. So we'll be looking to work with the Kenya Revenue Authority, National Treasury, to release £500 million into that particular space. Other concerns that have been done in terms of a law, petitioning Parliament for that, and working with the Cabinet Secretary in charge of the creative sector, which is now under culture, the arts, and heritage. And we're looking forward to be able to start looking at consolidating those particular views to present that as petitions to Parliament. Because I keep telling people, the Kenya Revenue Authority is like your rent collector, okay? The thing is, they collect rent on behalf of the landlord. They cannot give you amnesty. They cannot give you bricks on your rent. However, when you talk to them, they can actually forward those particular recommendations to the landlord and say, by the way, this tenant, this is how they earn, this is what it is that they do. Maybe if you want to retain them, this is what you ought to do. And in partnership with the on ways to be able to look at how then do we make it easier for people to do. TOT happens to be one of those things, because yes, while APA as an organization is talking about £500 million shillings, by the way, there's a guy who is making 5,000, 10,000 from their creative space. And this is one space that can employ everybody because people are monetizing their God-given talents. So moving forward, we will be working with the Kenya Revenue Authority. We've agreed to do that, to help them understand that yes, the creative sector is not everybody doesn't have a product. There are services that are there. The age groups are diverse. And so moving forward, there'll be many more meetings behind closed doors and others actually in the open where there'll be a lot of public support and we'll be able to move forward. But I'd like to appreciate all of you, industry leaders, who heeded the call to come. For those who are physically present here, for those who are online, asanteni sana. And this is the first step of a journey towards making the creative sector a livelihood maker for the people who will actually look at the creative sector for a livelihood. So thank you again, our hosts, for that. And I know we have quite a good support from the same, and you'll be seeing many of these sessions in future. So keep an eye out for the developments. Asanteni sana.
Thank you, Chairman Roy. Allow me at this juncture to call Ms. Martha Ngoko to come and close the session. Thank you.
So once again, a very good afternoon. We are very, very honored and pleased to have all of you with us today, the various associations represented here, and the creative sector as a whole. So from tax education and also on behalf of KRA and the domestic tax department, including all the other departments that were here with us this day, we would like to just appreciate you and to thank you, and we look forward to partnering with those who, for example, the Photography Association, we will get to talk to you once we are done with this, and for anyone else who would like us to partner in terms of even doing sensitizations and further engage in terms of demystifying taxes and tax literacy. So we thank you, and we'd also like to take an opportunity to just thank the Lord for this day. So allow me to just make a prayer so that we can conclude. So Almighty and Heavenly Father, we thank you for this day. Thank you for your love, your protection. Thank you for this engagement, the public participation. Father, that we even had a good engagement. We've been able to have discussions, and Father, whatever is going to come out of this, we pray that we shall get to grow, each and every one of us, and even our country at large. So Lord, we thank you and we honor you. We take this, just pray this shortly, trusting and believing in your holy name. Amen. Thank you. Back to you, Karanu.
Amen. Now we've come to the end of the day. I do not want to keep you on your seats any longer. However, before we disperse, I'll just request we have a photo session. After that, we are free to engage post the recorded session. Our subject matter experts will be on hand to address any other concerns we may have. So, ladies and gentlemen, allow me to ask you to get off your seats, come here to the front. We do a photo session. We shall be guided accordingly. I have been your host today from KRA. I am Karan Mushiri. So, ladies and gentlemen, please let's all come to the front.
Watu wa Ngong, hamjambo. Huyu ni mheshimiwa wenyu Miriri Moora.
First of all, I am very grateful for receiving this delegation from the Kenya Revenue Authority, and the fact that you now have a presence in Siaya. An office has been established here in Siaya. We are delighted about it because services will now be available to residents of Siaya, businessmen in Siaya. They don't have to go to Kisumu or go to Nairobi. So you are, as it were, bringing services closer to the people.
Hi, how are you?
Fine.
You have given us a deadline.
Yes.
That's it, June.
Yeah.
Mimi nimefurahia sana kwa sababu banda la KRA leo limefika katika mtaa wetu wa Ngong, na hii ni jambo ya muhimu sana kwa sababu as we speak percentage kubwa ya Wakenya ni wale wenye hawa complain na mambo ya KRA. Watu wanaona ni kama kulipa ushuru